Good morning to everybody. I am the Squeegee of Justice, and you are watching Trial TV Live. Thank you for joining us. Just going to do a mic check here, audio check. Okay, seems like we're doing all right. How's everybody doing today? I know it's cold out there, guys. I know it is cold. Oh, let's see. Oh, thank you, Rachel. I got my corduroys on. It's cold. It's freaking cold. I got the fire on. It's still 63 in here in the office. Chilly. Audio is good. Okay, cool. Thank you, guys. Mary, hello. Jenny, ooh, that is cold. 1 degree there. Yeah, my brother just sent a text, and it was, what was his temp? Wind chill is currently minus 24, and the air temperature is like 0 up where my kin are from. Ooh, cold, cold, cold. Hey, Pammy. Hey, Julie. Dreama Landry. Baka of 3. It's warmer in Minnesota. It's warmer down there, huh? Or up there, I should say. Rachel B., Krista Limited Edition, Regina, Nanar, good morning to you. 7 degrees in Louisiana. Yeah, my nephew's wife got 8 inches of snow in New Orleans. Let's see, Baka of 3. What are we covering next week? Well, let's get through this trial. First of all, let's get through this trial. But with the help of RA, I'm not sure what he's covering. We try not to cover the same trials as everybody else if we can help it. Try to cover different trials. But Fala, good morning to you. Only fan. Rachel B., 12 and sunny. Yes. Debbie Blair. Yeah, I love the fire. Thank you. Dreamer, you guys got 7. Yeah, I think it was officially 8 inches in New Orleans. And I think Pensacola Beach, I saw on the Weather Channel, they were showing snow on the beach. So cold, cold, cold. All right, let me do a check-in on the feed here. Let's see. All right, day 5. We're up to day 5. All right, so there's a feed in the court. Let's do that. Sorry for that, guys. Okay. And let me see here. I can definitely make this bigger so as to cover that. Don't need to see that. Hey, Bat, how are you? Can't even imagine snow on Pensacola Beach. Yeah, believe it or not, just insane. Pensacola got 8 inches. Wow. Wow. Are we going to rewatch Chen? Probably not. If there's a live trial, we'll just cover the live trial. If there's nothing going on, well, we have Segura. We still got to finish Segura. I think we're up to day 7 with him. So we still have, I think, 2 more days. But for now, we are covering Natalie Cochran. West Virginia versus Natalie Cochran. And I like the trial, but the pace is just brutal. Meaning yesterday they only had one witness, Dr. Peter, basically Peter Kuvasek. I'm sure I butchered that last name. But he was a pathologist, and he talked about Michael's... where's my... Oh, there it is. He talked about Michael's autopsy. So... yes, Mandy, I did get your email about... that was Laura Lee. I did get that. Thank you for that. I didn't have a chance to watch it, but let's go check that out. Mandy sent us something yesterday. Hey, Hellcat, good to see you. Reporter who broke the Natalie Cochran case details surprising. So this is Laura Lee. Laura. Exclusive. Reporter who broke the Natalie Cochran case details surprising start of the case. Reporter Jessica Farish takes us on a scene behind the scenes of a shocking case against Natalie Cochran, who's accused. Jessica, who uncovered key details of the case from the very beginning, reveals how it all started with a series of simple tips and spiraled into one of West Virginia's most jaw-dropping criminal investigations. So I'm not necessarily going to play that because that's another creator's content and an exclusive interview. So I will not play that, but I'll watch it in my voluminous spare time, Mandy. But thank you for sending that. I'll definitely have to check that out. So yesterday, Dr. Kuvasek, he did an autopsy 7 months later because they first considered the death not suspicious. Then law enforcement came to him later and said they needed to be performed. And that was it. They had a lot of trouble with their technology yesterday. Hopefully they will not have problems this time. Jenny says they had the one doc 2 in the beginning. The woman can't remember her name. Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm looking at just page 1. They had Dr. Diane Krieger and then Earl Gleam. You're right, Jenny. Thank you for that. I was just looking at my one page. So they had endocrinologist and then Earl Gleam. Yes, Dr. Krieger was pretty good. She was via Zoom. That's where they had all kinds of issues with the technology. Let me see. Okay. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Okay. She said his cause of death was a cerebral edema caused by hypoglycemia, basically low blood sugar. She talked a lot about what it is to have low blood sugar and low hypoglycemia. She said the medications may have been a cause, but not sure if he was taking seizure or asthma meds. And let's see, she said gastro bypass surgery could have caused it. Clearly, Michael did not have that. Low potassium may have caused it. Not likely. She did find benzodiazepine was in his urine, but a low amount. He came in with a blood glucose level of 21. She thought impact of skipping meals. Yeah, normal person wouldn't have that low blood sugar. Binge alcohol and don't eat. She said could lower your blood sugar, but there was really no evidence that Michael did that. The impact of insulin will drive your blood sugar down. And then we had Earl Gleam, who was a forensic examiner, and he looked at the 2 vials. So he looked at one vial, did not have any puncture defects, the other vial did. And Natalie was a pharmacist, so that's why we're thinking. So Mandy says, yes, she's been in the courtroom. It was an interesting interview, and I bet Lawyer Lee would come on here. Oh, she's all about lifting other channels up. All right, I'll reach out to her. See if we can get her on. Hey, Stacy, how are you? Good morning to you. Nice to see you. So let's see what else. Yeah, Dr. Krieger I thought was the best witness yesterday. They did have 3 witnesses. So I spoke incorrectly. They did have the 3 witnesses, and Dr. Krieger I thought was the best. Now here was something interesting in her cross. She was asked, that a large amount, oh, I think we got some content. I just saw something come up in the closed captioning. Let me find it. Mike was given 1 dose of IV antibiotics. Let's see. Is there any evidence that Mike OD'd on any other drug other than insulin? And she said no. Do the benzos cause low blood glucose levels? She said no. Oh, we're hearing something in the... All right. I hope they're not having trouble again. Trying to find my notes about... she thought that it would have taken, it was late afternoon that he was given this. So what caused him to fall in the morning? Yeah, because Natalie says that Mike fell, he was by the sink, I think she said he threw up, fell, hit his head, and then ends up in a fetal position. But if he was given just that 1 shot, or he thought he was taking something else, and he injected himself, which is what I think happened. I don't think she got him, because he'd be like, what are you doing? Unless she's like, here, let me administer this for you, meaning something else, a steroid or something else. Why would he then need another? Shoot, I can't find my note on that. Hold on, let me just read through this real quick. Oh, yeah. When would Natalie have an opportunity to inject Mike? And Dr. Krieger said, if I had to speculate, sometime that late afternoon. So people were in and out. So that would have been really, that was a weird, that kind of threw me. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, Pammy, the contractor said Natalie said different, though. He went down gently, hanging onto the cabinet. That is true. Rachel B. says she was alone with him enough to have opportunity. Oh, even if it was in the hospital. Okay. Rachel thinks, I always thought he was given more shots than the 1. Hey, Brett, good to see you. He says, Brett says, the afternoon shot part was in a discussion about her suggesting of more than 1 shot. She suggested he could have been given a 2nd dose that afternoon. Yeah. When would Natalie have the opportunity to inject Mike? And she kept saying, you want me to speculate? You want me to speculate? And he basically was asking her to speculate. And she's like, they would have to been sometime that late afternoon. Hey, Florida PI Sam, how are you? Thank you for joining us. Dream Melandra, I believe she had been giving him something for a while that caused all his issues. Yeah, it's entirely possible. You know, she could have been drugging him for weeks, for months. Hey, therapist, you know. Good to see you. I hope you're doing well. Let's see. You're cold? Yeah, we are all cold. Rachel B., I find it so strange she arranged and gave him his supplements. Yeah, I agree. Like, why was he not in charge of his supplements? Hey, Todd. Good for you. Glad you're back with us, and good for you. Yeah, Rachel, I think so too. I think it was a long game. Well, hopefully today we will hear some better testimony. Well, we're going to hear there was a second autopsy, and we're up to witness 15. So we're up to state witness 15. They've gone through 14 so far, and the first autopsy, I don't know, it didn't really reveal much, right? Dr. Kuvisek. He tested for heavy metals, drugs, and alcohol. Cause of death was undetermined. Lots of evidence wasn't available anymore to see if insulin was used. So how did they go on the second autopsy and discover that it was insulin? We'll have to find out. Hey, Fala. Good to see you. And Lacey, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Fala says, my other half is a heart patient, and I put his meds in his weekly container for him. We used to do that for Aaron's grandmother. We had the little weekly, daily, I should say. So we would do that. But she was in her 90s, so that makes sense. Brad says, I also think it's incredibly sus that she was sending people normal blood sugar numbers when he did not have diabetes and ended up dying with very low blood sugar. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the way she describes it, he threw up, hit his head on the cabinets, ended up, in a fetal position. And yet she's taking pictures of him, letting him sit there for, I don't know, half hour, an hour, maybe. And then the contractors, she calls the contractors. All right, what's going on here? Do we have some, that's not for us. We're having a hot mic moment, but I can't really hear anything. Rachel B., I take about 10 supplements a day that I organize myself. My husband has no clue what they even are. I could be eating crack for all he knows. Yeah. Oh, Fala. He was 35 when he had a massive heart attack. Wow, so we are still young, but he's 45 now. Just something I do, but it's supplements and for the elderly is different. Agreed. And Rachel says, yeah, Brat, why even check his blood sugar at all? Krista, limited edition. Some I have my meds in one of those containers, but they come in a bubble pack. Well, most of them. Yeah, I mean, I can understand it, I guess. I mean, it's not so far. I mean, she's a pharmacist. I'm not quite sure what he did. Oh, wait, he was IT. That's right. He was IT, setting up networks. So that's what he did. So I can understand. She's a pharmacist. I can see him, asking for her to do that, and take ownership of that. So let's see. Natalie says he threw up in the sink, hit his head, but the contractors, what did Jason Bowen, day 3, what did Jason Bowen say? So around 12:21, he had just left Lowe's. This is the contractor. So he got over there around 12:30-ish. So Jason Bowen, who was the general contractor, said Mike had gotten sick at the sink and lowered himself down onto the floor. He didn't hit his head on the cabinet. So definitely hearing some conflicting stories. But why would you, again, it just goes back to why would you just let your significant other, husband, wife, She's known him since high school. Why would she just let him sit there? I don't, or lay there. And or then she picked him, or she had him picked up and not call 911. I just don't get that. Brat says, Rachel B., yep, if she was testing at all, it could have been so she could wait until it bottomed out before going to the hospital, but was lying about the numbers. Krista Limited Edition, her behavior after was just was so super odd and suspect, but does that make her a murderer? There are a lot of reasonable doubt. Do you find her behavior odd? Jenny says, if there's any evidence of him hitting his head, my bet is she hit him. So she injected him and came up behind him and smacked him? Possible. So does it make her, it's super odd that she did that? Well, we talked about, do you have a responsibility to help somebody? What's it, the Good Samaritan law? We talked about that, I think, on day 1 or 2. Did she have an obligation to help her husband? When multiple people were telling her, get him to the hospital, get him to the hospital. She was saying, well, no, he doesn't want to go. He had a DNR. But I don't know. Baca 3 poll, will we have another half day today? Maybe. We'll see. Hey, Shirley. How you doing? Yeah, it's chilly. It is chilly. It's chilly everywhere. I think Brat says, as if she conked him in the head and then injected him? Could be. Yeah, I wonder if nobody has said anything yet about... We haven't actually heard from an official ME. We've heard from the pathologist. But Dreama Landry, she was making every excuse. We haven't actually heard from a medical examiner. But maybe, because I know they exhumed him a second time. So maybe we'll hear from an ME at some point. Yeah, she hit him first to knock him out. Lily Wayne, to not call 911, etc. She just may have wanted him unalived. Yeah. I think it's, I don't know. I'm still kind of on the fence, to be quite honest. I think those vials, the one vial that the label was switched, that's definitely like, what's that about? Was that her? Was that him? Is there any solid proof that she has done this? Yeah, Julie, wouldn't that have been noticed on the first autopsy, some kind of fracture in the skull or no? I would think so. I would absolutely think so, that they would have, even in the hospital, they would have checked him, And his one friend, Chris, right? Chris Davis, he's like one of his best friends. He said he was like checking his nose, his ears, he said that Natalie said he hit his head, so he was kind of checking around. Yeah, Ford PI Sam, the whole not taking him to the hospital is very sus. I agree. Nan R says, I listened to Laura Lee, which made me want to watch. As a retired RN, I would never test for...
All rise. The Honorable H. Patrick III, Judge of the Circuit Court of Raleigh County, is now sitting.
All right, guys, we'll get to court.
Good morning, everyone. We continue in the trial of State of West Virginia versus Natalie Page Cochran. This is case number 23-F-343K. The court observes that all parties are present, including the defendant. What matters do we have to take up at this time?
Your Honor, yesterday when I was referring to defendant's exhibit number 10. I mistakenly put it in my folder and took it with me. I did not move for its admission. I would like to return that to the clerk and move for its admission.
All right. Is there any objection, Ms. Acord or Mr. Truman?
No, Your Honor.
Very well. Defendant's number 10 will be admitted into evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome. Any other matters before we bring out the jury?
We need to make sure that Dr. Banerjee is connected.
Okay. Will your first witness be an expert, Mr. Truman, Ms. Acord?
It will, Your Honor.
Pardon?
Dr. Uribe will testify in person. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Do we have Dr. Banerjee on the line?
I called her earlier. I'll make sure she's still around.
Pardon? Okay. I think we're going to have the phone number, Stan.
Yes, sir.
Let's go ahead and connect her. Is it Banerjee or Banerjee?
B with a B, with a, as in boy.
Okay.
Banerjee.
Good morning.
Hello, Dr. Banerjee. Are you there?
Hi. Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning. This is Judge Kirkpatrick. You are live and broadcasting in the courtroom. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Yes, sir. I don't have a video link. I don't know if I'm supposed to use the same one from yesterday or not.
Well, we are a little deficient in that department, and so if it be okay with you, can you just listen by telephone?
Oh, sure.
All right.
Thank you so much. I'm going to put myself on mute, okay?
All right. Thank you very much. Bring in the jury.
Well, if her audio is that low, this is going to be brutal because we're going to hear everybody in the courtroom really loud, and we're not going to hear her. So, hang in there, chat. Hang in there.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Good morning.
I hope the sausage biscuits were satisfactory. Don't get spoiled. It's beans and onions from here on out. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed them, and we are ready to go. Again, I'm happy to see smiling faces. We are still on the state's case in chief, and so we'll get to business right away. And I'll ask the state to please call their next witness.
Your Honor, the state calls Dr. Paul Uribe to the stand.
Very well. You'll raise your right hand, please, sir. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
You may have a seat right there.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Akron.
Sir, could you please state and spell your full name for the record?
Sure. Paul Shane Uribe, Paulshane Uribe.
And what is your occupation?
My occupation is a forensic pathologist.
And for our benefit, what is forensic pathology?
Forensic pathology is a specialty of medicine that specializes in unnatural, unexpected, or violent death.
Do you have any military experience?
Yes.
What sort of professional training do you have?
Professional training includes medical school from the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences, which is the military medical school in Bethesda, Maryland, a transitional internship, a residency in anatomic and clinical pathology, and a fellowship in forensic pathology.
And where are you currently employed?
I currently work as the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner at the Fort Bend County Medical Examiner's Office in Rosenberg, Texas, southwest of Houston.
Prior to your current employment, what is your past work experience?
Past work experience includes 23 years and change at U.S. Army. In the Army, I worked as a general pathologist. I worked as a medical examiner, a forensic pathologist, with the Armed Forces Medical Examiner System. I've also worked part-time in several jurisdictions, including Clark County, Nevada, which represents Las Vegas and Southern Nevada, the state of Mississippi, New Jersey, Baltimore, spent some time in South Carolina, so I've had a couple of part-time jobs in addition to my full-time employment.
Do you have any peer-reviewed publications?
Yes.
Have you presented at national and international forensic conferences?
Yes.
And do you have any board certifications?
Yes.
What about active state medical licenses? How many of those do you carry?
I currently have 9 state medical licenses, all in good standing.
Are you a member of any professional organizations?
Yes.
And what might those be?
The National Association of Medical Examiners and American Academy of Forensic Sciences. I'm on multiple committees and working groups for both of those organizations. I'm also a member of the International Association of Coroners and Medical Examiners, the College of American Pathologists, which is the largest group of pathologists in the world, and the American Society of Clinical Pathology.
In your career, about how many autopsies have you personally performed?
I've personally performed over 2,500 autopsies.
And in your work as a forensic pathologist, have you ever been involved in any high-profile cases?
Yes.
Just briefly, an overview, what kind of cases were those?
There were, let's see, my first...
We object to that question. It's irrelevant to these proceedings.
Your Honor, I would argue that if you were allowed to answer, they would be relevant cases.
Overruled. I'll permit the witness to answer. Go ahead, please.
My first high-profile case in the military was a group of Christian missionaries who were kidnapped by Somali pirates. This was back in 2010, 2011. I wrote the federal opinion for the George Floyd case, and I did a series of suspected insulin homicides in a VA hospital in Clarksburg, West Virginia.
Your Honor, subject to cross-examination by the defense, I would ask that this witness be treated as an expert in the field of forensic pathology pursuant to Rule 702.
All right, Mr. Selden, do you wish to engage in voir dire pertaining to this witness's credentials?
No, Your Honor. We accept him as an expert.
All right, the court declares this witness to be an expert in the field of forensic pathology.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Uribe, did you prepare a report in this case?
Yes.
And I am now holding what I would ask to be marked as, I believe, states 21.
21, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Dr. Uribe, could you just briefly look over that and tell me if that is the report that you wrote in this case?
Yes, it is.
Does it appear to have been altered in any way from the way that you submitted it?
No.
Did you review certain records when preparing your report in this case?
Yes.
Could you briefly tell us which records you reviewed?
The records I reviewed were medical records from the Charleston Area Medical Center, Raleigh General Hospital, some hospice records, the initial autopsy report and autopsy photographs, and investigative documents, including interviews, investigative statements from police and other investigative officers.
Apologize, Your Honor. I forgot I was going to need the projector.
All right.
Your Honor, in the interim, I'm going to ask for admission of State's Exhibit 21.
Any objection, Mr. Selden?
No objection, Your Honor.
State's Exhibit 21 will be admitted into evidence.
Dr. Uribe, did you chart Mr. Cochran's glucose and potassium levels from his medical records?
Yes.
And does this accurately reflect the chart that you produced?
Yes.
What about those levels were significant to you?
There was significant, I wouldn't say significant, I would say profound hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia is low blood glucose. His admission glucose level was 21, which is incredibly unusual. It's also associated with a low potassium as well. Later on in the hospitalization, once he was treated for the hypoglycemia, the blood sugar went up and then it went back down again. This is a pattern that I refer to as refractory hypoglycemia, which is where someone comes in hypoglycemic, you treat them with sugars, their blood sugar goes back up, but then something is dragging the sugar back down. And that is to me, that is a significant pattern.
And why is that pattern significant to you?
Because there are only a few things that can do that. One of the big things is insulin administration, because insulin or certain other drugs like oral hypoglycemic agents, which are oral drugs that you take to control diabetes, that drug effect from either insulin or these other agents serve to continue to drag the sugar levels down despite treatment. So you give someone who's hypoglycemic sugar, you expect it to bounce back up and stay that way. But there's some sort of force that's pulling the sugar back down again. And that to me, that's a significant red flag.
And given that you classify it as a red flag, had you seen this in a clinical setting, what sort of testing would you have performed?
The testing to be performed, when you suspect exogenous insulin administration, meaning insulin being given that's unprescribed, there's a very, very small window where you can do adequate testing. The classic teaching is you draw for laboratory testing, you draw an insulin level and a C-peptide. Now, if I may explain to the jury what these two things are. So the body makes a protein called proinsulin. And when insulin is about to be released by the pancreas, proinsulin is basically, essentially cut in half. And half of it is, what's regarded as insulin. The other half is something called C-peptide. So when you test for insulin and C-peptide levels, you expect them to be, essentially in a 1-to-1 ratio, because you have one molecule, you break it in half, you have, two representative pieces. When you administer insulin to someone, you have a lot of insulin but no C-peptide, because that C-peptide wasn't, cleaved off and wasn't relieved by the body, or wasn't released by the body. So when you suspect...
Your Honor, at this point we have to object to this testimony. This witness is an expert in forensic pathology. Now he's testifying as to chemistry and other matters that go out of his range of expertise. This testimony is about chemical effects, and Dr. Krieger was the expert specialized in this area, not this witness. He's a forensic pathologist.
I think he's laying the groundwork, and I think it relates to his field. I'll overrule the objection. Dr. Uribe, you can continue.
So when you have exogenous administration of insulin, meaning administration of insulin from an outside source, if you suspect that, when your patient is hypoglycemic in front of you, so when they're, profoundly hypoglycemic, and you suspect that, you need to draw an insulin and C-peptide level then. If you draw it after you administer treatment, then the body starts releasing natural insulin, so you're going to get that C-peptide again. And when the laboratory testing that you would expect in insulin administration is a high insulin level with no C-peptide. But once again, there's a very, very short window of testing where clinically you can order this.
Any of that testing have been performed after Mr. Cochran passed away?
No, because there's no postmortem utility in insulin and C-peptide levels postmortem.
Did you review imaging studies in this case?
Yes.
Were any of those indicative of head trauma?
No.
Now, you performed an autopsy on Mr. Cochran's remains, correct?
Yes.
About how long after Mr. Cochran passed away did your autopsy take place?
It was over 2 years.
Can you explain to us why there was such a long window between his death and your autopsy?
I was asked to do a second autopsy by the Raleigh district attorney at the time, Benjamin Hatfield, because of the suspicious circumstances in this case.
What was the condition of the body upon exhumation at the time of your examination?
There was marked decomposition. And what I mean by marked decomposition is I was told that the body was embalmed. If they were embalmed, they weren't embalmed very well at all. The body basically consisted of a skeleton with some degree of soft tissue that had turned into what we call adipocere, which is like where the fatty tissues of the body turn into almost like a hard chalky soap. It's a natural natural type of decomposition. So there was some adipocered soft tissue, and the body was largely skeletonized.
Is there a typical protocol that you follow when you conduct an autopsy?
Yes.
Can you just very briefly, very high level, explain for us what that looks like?
Sure. So you never want to do an autopsy in a vacuum. So the first part, and sometimes the most important part, is review of the circumstances of death. You never want to do an autopsy in a vacuum and just here's a body, figure out why they died, because you need to know as much as you can about the circumstances of why they died. So the investigation, medical records, everything preceding when the person died, and then once you're doing the autopsy, it's broken up into several parts. The first part is the external examination, where you look at the body. You basically just describe what you see. Height, weight, eye color, hair color, evidence of trauma, evidence of natural disease, evidence of injury, things like that. Once you finish the external examination, you can open the body and do an internal examination. The internal examination, once again, looks for evidence of trauma, looks for evidence of natural disease. You take out the internal organs and dissect them, looking for evidence of natural disease, trauma, things like that. You can collect tissues or body fluids for additional testing or microscopic analysis. Once you finish the external or internal examination, then you can, send for ancillary studies, which include microscopic analysis of tissue, analysis of blood or other tissues for toxicology to see what drugs were in, what drugs or medications were in the body at the time of death. And then you correlate all of these findings together, the scene investigation, the autopsy findings, the ancillary studies, and we use that to reach a cause and manner of death.
And what did you determine were Michael Cochran's cause and manner of death?
Michael Cochran's cause and manner of death there's a lot of circumstantial evidence in this case that does not correlate with the autopsy findings or medical record. And whenever we have that, I call it a discordance, or things that don't add up or make sense, those are sort of the red flags that we look at. With the entirety of the circumstances, including the initial autopsy findings, the second autopsy findings, which there weren't much, the history of profound hypoglycemia that's very much unexplained. I came to the conclusion that the cause of death was exogenous insulin administration, and there's no explanation for why a non-diabetic, otherwise relatively healthy male would have such profound hypoglycemia, and also refractory hypoglycemia as well. And there's no other viable explanation for it. That the only reasonable conclusion that I could make is that he was given insulin.
And so specifically, what is his manner of death?
Manner of death would be homicide, because there's no evidence that he administered insulin himself. People don't accidentally administer insulin to themselves or am given.
Your Honor, we object at this time. The statement that it is a homicide, that's for this court to decide. It is a conclusion that this witness cannot come to.
Your Honor, that is a manner of death which is determined by all medical examiners.
The objection's overruled.
Dr. Uribe, what other possible causes did you rule out when you reached that conclusion?
So when doing an autopsy, you look at the totality of the case, and sometimes you can break it down into different pieces, but you have to look at everything in its totality. The circumstances in this case, was there evidence of trauma? There was a questionable fall as the initiating event, but there was no evidence of trauma in the medical records. There was a questionable evidence of a questionable seizure. Once again, I'm not sure a history of seizure disorder has been substantiated, so that sort of remains a question. There other causes such as heart disease. Could heart disease cause someone to go unconscious? Sure, I see it all the time. People with hypertension and heart disease, they can have a cardiac arrhythmia as well. But these cardiac arrhythmias aren't due to hypertension and a bad heart. They're not associated with hypoglycemia at all. There was a question of steroid use or clomiphene, enclomiphene, which is enclomiphene is an androgen agonist, and a lot of men use, in women it's used for fertility treatments to hyperovulate, because what this drug does is it causes the body to produce excess sex hormone. When used in men, it's used to sort of reboot natural testosterone promotion. But enclomiphene by itself is not associated with seizures, is not associated with cardiac arrhythmia. So that didn't make sense either. There are other causes of hypoglycemia. There could be a pancreatic tumor that secretes insulin periodically. Those are incredibly rare. There's a number of other medical conditions that can, but there's no evidence substantiating any of those other causes. And why would they suddenly present during this time when the medical history and circumstances are suspicious? So there are very, very few causes that would cause an otherwise healthy 38-year-old male to have a blood glucose of 21 that's confirmed by the lab. And especially with the associated hypokalemia, which is the low potassium as well. When you have profound hypoglycemia and hypokalemia, so low blood sugar and low potassium, with no other reasonable or viable explanation, I came to the conclusion that this is likely due to insulin that was administered at some point.
And has anything come to your attention since generating your report that would change any of your conclusions?
No.
Thank you. I have no further questions for this witness.
Cross-examination, Mr. Selden.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Uribe. I am Stanley Selden. I am co-counsel for the defendant, Natalie Cochran.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. And again, how did you learn of this case?
I learned of this case from the previous Raleigh District Attorney, Benjamin Hatfield.
Okay. And were you hired by the Raleigh County Prosecutor's Office to testify in this case?
I was hired by the Raleigh County Prosecutor's Office to look at this case, at the time possibly perform a second autopsy, which we ended up doing, and then subsequently for my testimony in this case, yes.
So the state and the Raleigh County Prosecuting Attorney's Office is paying you for your services, isn't that correct?
They're compensating me for my time, yes.
Yeah. And I believe you said that you have done over 2,500 autopsies, and have you testified in an equal number of cases?
I've performed over 2,500 autopsies. I've testified approximately 40 times.
Okay. And of those 40 times, have you always testified for the prosecution in court?
No.
Sorry?
No.
No. About how many of those cases have you testified for the prosecution?
Approximately, it's about an 80-20% split. It's heavily weighted towards the prosecution because I'm often the medical examiner who performed the autopsy. So in a case of someone who got shot, I'm the doctor who performed the autopsy. I'm naturally called by the prosecution. But
Okay.
I do take defense cases as well.
Now, you said you weren't really sure. It was a number of years when you conducted your autopsy. Would it surprise you to learn that you conducted your autopsy almost 4 years after the date of death of Michael Cochran?
I may have been confused about my dates, but that could be true. I would have to check my report to verify the dates.
I submit that Michael Cochran died approximately February 11th of 2019, and your report is authored, it has a date of April 5th of 2024, so that's almost 5 years, isn't that correct?
Yes, and the second autopsy was performed in July of 2023.
Okay. The first autopsy, conducted by Dr. Kubitschek, was conducted only 7 months after Michael Cochran's death. Were you aware of that?
Yes.
And the first autopsy was done, and the results were because the body was much less decomposed after 7 months than after 5 years. Correct?
Then after...
You conducted your autopsy almost 4 years after the original autopsy. The state of the body would have been vastly more decomposed. Isn't that correct?
Yes, the body was vastly more decomposed, and a lot of that is because I don't think he was properly embalmed. If he was embalmed, the body obviously would have been in better shape.
I did not ask the reason. I just asked about the time period. Thank you. You've answered the question. Did the advanced decomposition limit your ability to make certain diagnoses?
Yes.
Was there any finding during your autopsy that detected any insulin in Michael Cochran's body or any C peptides?
No.
And this could not be determined because of the advanced decomposition of the body. Isn't that correct?
That's correct, and there's also no...
Thank you. You answered the question. Now, because you did not detect insulin or C-peptide in the body because of the advanced decomposition, how did you conclude that it was insulin administration related to death?
It was a clinical correlation from review of the medical records.
Can you say with absolute medical certainty that exogenous insulin administration was the cause of Michael Cochran's hypoglycemia and death?
I can say
absolute certainty, 100%.
I don't use the term absolute for anything.
Despite all of your assertions, you cannot accurately conclude that exogenous insulin administration is the cause of death, can you?
I don't believe that statement is true.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your answer.
I don't believe that statement is true. I think you can, based on clinical correlation in the absence of any other viable explanation for profound, in the absence of any other causative finding for it.
Was there any testing in the medical records from any of the hospitals that showed insulin and C-peptide levels?
No.
Sorry?
No.
Okay. And there was no testing like this because there was no suspicion whatsoever by his doctors that he had been...
That calls for speculation. He can't testify as to the suspicions of his doctors.
Sustained.
Despite all of the testing in the hospitals that Michael Cochran underwent, there were no tests done for insulin in his body. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
Do you know what the medical term refractory hypoglycemia means?
Yes.
And isn't the definition of refractory hypoglycemia that it is a prolonged period of low blood sugar that doesn't respond to standard treatments?
That's not the definition.
What do you think the definition is?
The definition of refractory hypoglycemia is hypoglycemia that persists despite treatment for the hypoglycemia.
So, do you know that to correct low blood sugar, like the ones demonstrated in Michael, that to control that, it requires high doses of glucose or continuous monitoring?
Yes.
So by your testimony, did Michael Cochran have refractory hypoglycemia?
Yes.
Isn't the correct answer to that question no, because his blood sugar responded to therapy? He was given D50 glucose and his blood sugar levels went down.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that question. The witness has already answered the question, and Mr. Selden has simply rephrased his answer.
I think it's a fair question. I'll allow it. The objection's overruled. Answer if you can, please, Doctor.
Yeah, and I want to clarify. The question is, his blood sugar responded to therapy. He was given D50 glucose, and his blood sugar levels went up, not down.
Yes, his blood sugars did respond to glucose therapy, but then they also subsequently went down after they initially responded. That is the definition of refractory hypoglycemia.
Your Honor, at this time I would like to have defendant's exhibit number 10.
All right.
Dr. Uribe, this is a chart very similar to the one you use, which shows the date and time of the monitoring of Michael Cochran's blood glucose levels. And it has a column, number 3, that suggests the hours since allegedly Michael Cochran was injected with insulin, which appears from testimony to be around 12 p.m. on February 6, 2019. And the last or fourth column has a listing of whether insulin, Lispro Humalog insulin, was active in his body. Okay? Do you see that chart and those columns?
Yes, I see the chart.
Now, on February 6th of 2019, at 8:20 p.m., which is 20 hours by military time, his blood glucose level was 21, which was approximately 8 hours and 20 minutes after insulin was allegedly injected in him. Do you see that column?
Yes, I see the column.
Was Humalog insulin active in his body? Was it still working in his body?
I would say yes, but I do object to some of the columns of this chart.
Your objection is noted, but we're going to go through it, and I'm going to ask you questions about it. How long do you think human Lispro insulin is active in the body? How long does it work?
It usually works within, or it usually works 4 to 6 hours, but there,
I'm sorry, but 4 to 6 hours, right?
4 to 6 hours, but there's also a dose dependent. If you get a large dose, then the effects can last longer. It's a very difficult thing to study because we can't inject otherwise healthy people with superhuman levels of insulin and see how long it takes for the insulin effects to wear off. But with the average dose of Lispro insulin, the average expectancy of it functioning is 4 to 6 hours. But there is a dose-related effect of that as well.
So if Michael Cochran was given an injection of a, as you term, fairly normal dose, the Humalog insulin would only be expected to work 4 to 6 hours. Isn't that correct?
Yes, but it raises...
Very simple question. Now, February 7th of 2019, he's being closely monitored. We don't have a blood glucose level there. It's now 12 and a half hours, approximately, since the alleged injection. 12 and a half hours, under any circumstances, a normal dose, or however you want to term it, of insulin, it's no longer active in the body. Isn't that correct?
At 12 hours, generally no, but there's also the dose-dependent feature, which I discussed earlier.
That statement. Generally, no. Human insulin isn't active in the body after 12 and a half hours, correct?
Generally, no.
The next two entries, well, the next entry is also on February 7th
now 12 hours and 5 more minutes since the last meeting. February 7th, 2019, at 12:30, I believe it's 12:33 a.m. Now, his glucose levels are going up. He's responding to treatment because sometime around that time, he was given a dose of D50 glucose. D50 glucose is used to raise blood glucose levels. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
So he's responding to treatment at this time. Would that be a fair statement?
Slightly, but he's still significantly hypoglycemic.
Well, and that depends on what your definition of hypoglycemia is. If the threshold is 70 milligrams per deciliter in a person without diabetes, that could be considered hypoglycemia.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next two columns, his blood glucose level is going up. It's now 80 and then 187. And he's responding to the treatment. His levels are going up. Wouldn't that be correct?
Yes.
Now, suddenly, approximately 3 hours later, his blood glucose levels are going down. They've gone from 187 all the way down to 44. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And you really can't state why. Correct? You
Correct.
talk about refractory hypoglycemia, other causes, etc. It's really unknown why his blood glucose level goes down to 44. Would that be correct?
Correct.
At 6:22 a.m., approximately an hour later, his glucose goes back up to 95. We don't know why. Correct?
Correct.
Then at 10:33 a.m., about 4 hours later, back down to 60. We can't positively say why that happened. Correct?
Correct.
And from the other time marks, from February 7th to February 8th, his blood glucose levels have now gone way up, and by any definition, they would be within normal limits. Isn't that correct?
They are above normal limits.
But they're no longer low, and they're no longer indicative of hypoglycemia at that time. Correct?
Correct.
So in summary of that, from February 7th, 2019, 11:53 a.m., when the blood glucose levels are at 154, and afterwards, you cannot say Humalog insulin was active in Michael Cochran's body at those times. Isn't that correct?
Correct. That would make sense.
For clarification, what are the causes of hypoglycemia that you considered?
Could you repeat the question? Because I can't tell if you said hypo or hyperglycemia.
Hypo, H-Y-P-O.
Okay, hypoglycemia can be caused by a number of different things, including pancreatic tumors, which can spontaneously secrete insulin. These are fairly rare. They were not identified.
Excuse me, Dr. Uribe, I don't want an extended explanation, just what the causes were.
Causes include adrenal insufficiency, drug or medication effect, pancreatic tumors, sepsis, multisystem organ failure.
Okay.
Those are the big ones.
All right. You state in your report that insulinoma, which is insulin-producing tumors in the pancreas that can cause hypoglycemia, that was excluded by the first autopsy, but this isn't really true, is it? The first autopsy didn't exclude that. Isn't that right?
They did not identify a pancreatic tumor.
Okay. Isn't it true that when the body decomposes, the organs of which pancreas is one of the first organs to decompose?
Yes.
Okay. So in the first autopsy and your autopsy, the second one, because the pancreas was essentially decomposed, you can't determine whether there are any tumors producing insulin. Wouldn't that be a fair statement?
I can go by what Dr. Kubitschek said in his report, and that no pancreatic tumor was identified.
Okay. It's reported that Michael Cochran used medications he ordered from abroad. He used various substances, and you can't exclude those substances or medications as having caused his hypoglycemia because you don't know what they were. Wouldn't that be a correct statement?
The medication...
They're not listed anywhere, so you can't include or exclude them, correct?
The medications that I am aware that he was taking are not associated with hypoglycemia.
I'm talking about ones that weren't included. No accurate reportings of what those were. You can't exclude them because you don't know what they were, right?
Sure.
Okay. And any substances, medications, etc., can't be excluded because they could have been eliminated from his body after death and decomposition. Isn't that correct?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. Any of these substances, medications, etc., cannot be excluded because they could have been eliminated from his body after death and decomposition. Isn't that correct? The substances are gone.
Some substances would be affected by decomposition. Some medications and drugs would be able to be detected despite decomposition, even in an autopsy 7 months after death.
Okay. You said, now, let me rephrase. You can't definitively say that insulin was present in Michael Cochran's body after his death and decomposition. There was no insulin in his body, correct?
Insulin rapidly degenerates and decomposes. That's one of the reasons why postmortem insulin testing and postmortem C-peptide testing is, you can't do it. There's no utility for it.
Okay, so you can't tell if insulin was in his body for all the reasons you talked about, right?
Correct.
Okay. And after death, you say you can't do any kind of insulin testing, right? Post-mortem insulin testing can't be done.
There are some ways you can detect insulin post-mortem.
Okay. Did you do any of those tests that showed insulin in his body?
No.
Okay. So because of that, because there wasn't any tests or insulin present in Michael's body after death, you cannot say with absolute medical certainty that insulin was involved in Michael Cochran's hypoglycemia or death, can you?
First, I wouldn't use the term absolute, and there is no other viable explanation for profound hypoglycemia in a non-diabetic, otherwise, relatively healthy male. There are no natural conditions that bring someone's blood glucose to a lab-confirmed level of 21.
You've made that statement. Let me clarify with some other questions. What if you were told that Michael Cochran injected himself numerous times with insulin prior to his death? Would that change your conclusions? And let me clarify a little more.
It's possible, but why would a non-diabetic person inject themselves with insulin?
Well, that's a good question. If they were a bodybuilder and they were using insulin to assist them in their bodybuilding, enhancing their body for various reasons, that could be a reason for self-injection of insulin, couldn't it?
To my knowledge, bodybuilders don't use insulin.
Really? So you don't know that Mr. Olympia died from overdosing himself with insulin. That's history. You weren't aware of that?
Your Honor, objection. What is the relevance of how Mr. Olympia died and the fact that he was using insulin? We don't even know that he was using it as a bodybuilding technique.
Because he just said he doesn't know why anyone would inject themselves with insulin.
I'll overrule the objection. Please continue.
Thank you. Were you not aware Mr. Olympia, a bodybuilder, died from self-injected insulin?
No.
Okay. were you not aware that in the Journal of Emergency Medicine, Volume 56, Issue 3, March of 2019, there is an article by Matthew Heidet, Heidet, MD, that is devoted to severe hypoglycemia due to cryptic insulin use in a bodybuilder. Were you never aware of that article?
No, I'm not aware of a solitary case study that was written 5 years ago at this point.
All right. Well, if you had reviewed that article, it doesn't talk about one specific case. It references many cases. Okay? So, it's possible, maybe even probable, that Michael Cochran, a bodybuilder, used insulin. That would be a reason. Correct?
I'm not aware of it. I would be happy to review the article if you were to provide it.
All right. Michael Cochran is documented in many medical records that he had an enlarged heart, correct? And specifically, I'll reference you to his discharge summary, which says he has an enlarged heart. Okay? That was one of his diagnoses.
Okay.
All right. Isn't it true that chronic long-term substance abuse can cause an enlarged heart?
Yes.
Are you aware that when a person is in a coma or has been unconscious for a long period of time and they're admitted into the hospital, that their naked body is thoroughly examined by hospital staff to determine such things as bruising, external signs of trauma, etc.? You aware of that?
Generally, yes.
Okay. And nowhere in the hospital medical records is it cataloged that there were any injection sites or signs of injection in Michael Cochran's body. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. Isn't it more likely that Michael's chronic substance abuse, his seizures and seizure history, his swollen brain or edema, his abnormal liver enzymes and liver problems, his possible abuse of testosterone, his enlarged heart, and all of this combination of things, which you call a constellation, that they caught up with Michael and resulted in his death, not because of anything Natalie Cochran did? None of the things you listed would present as severely profound hypoglycemia on admission.
Because of all of these things, Michael was not a healthy 38-year-old male. Isn't that correct?
It depends on what you consider your definition of healthy is.
Okay. Dr. Kubitschek's autopsy examination 7 months after Michael's death showed no physical evidence of insulin or insulin injections in Michael's body. Isn't that correct?
Yes, but I don't believe he was looking.
You answered my question. And you conducted an autopsy approximately 4 years after Michael's death, with still no objective physical evidence of insulin in Michael's body. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
So the only reasonable conclusion is that you cannot determine the cause and manner of Michael Cochran's death, and as Dr. Kubitschek stated, you cannot determine the cause of death, it's undetermined, and you cannot determine the manner of death, it's undetermined. Isn't that correct?
Cause and manner of death are both opinions. I believe the circumstantial evidence in this case, I've already stated my opinion on that.
All right. I don't believe I have any more questions at this time.
All
just
right.
a moment.
Redirect Ms. Akers.
Just a moment, Your Honor. I need to confer with counsel.
Okay.
What other question? When Humalog insulin, or any other type of insulin for that matter, but specifically Humalog Lispro insulin, once it's injected into the body, its effects or activity in the body, its effects in the body are not instantaneous. It takes approximately 15 minutes to begin working. Isn't that correct?
It takes a period of time, 5 to 15 minutes generally.
Okay. So if Michael Cochran were injected with Humalog insulin, he wouldn't just drop to the ground unconscious. It would take time for the effects to begin. Wasn't that true?
If you're talking about collapsing right after injection, that would not happen.
Okay. Thank you. No more questions.
All right, now, Ms. Akers.
Dr. Uribe, when you reviewed the medical records in this case, did you also review the toxicology report from the hospital? In fact, sorry, the urine drug screen?
Yes.
Was there anything remarkable about that?
The urine admission drug screen was positive for benzodiazepines.
Did you review Dr. Krieger's report in this matter?
I believe I did, but I did after I had written my consultation, because I didn't want her opinion to bias mine.
And as you stand here today, what is your opinion on that report?
On Dr. Krieger's report?
Yes, sir.
I think Dr. Krieger is an eminently qualified endocrinologist who has the clinical background of treating diabetic patients, which I don't have. I mean, I don't really treat my patients.
Mr. Honor, his opinion of Dr. Krieger really doesn't figure into his testimony.
Your Honor, we've repeatedly asked about the opinion of Dr. Kubitschek. I don't see why the opinion of Dr. Krieger is any different.
Overruled.
You can continue if you have anything else to add, Dr.
Oh,
Krieger.
no, I have nothing else to add.
Thank you. Did the fact that you were hired by the state to do a report in this matter affect your testimony in any way?
No.
In addition to the advanced decomposition of Mr. Cochran's body, why were you unable to perform insulin and C-peptide studies during your autopsy?
Because there's no utility in testing for insulin and C-peptide post-mortem.
Do you have any way of knowing how many doses of insulin Mr. Cochran would have received before his death?
No.
In your opinion, what was the mechanism that ultimately caused Michael Cochran to die?
I believe the clinical correlation and medical record review demonstrates with the profound hypoglycemia and hypokalemia, which I previously described, that there was an exogenous administration of insulin. It does not appear to me to be self-inflicted nor accidental in nature.
And based on your review of the medical records that you received, who was Mr. Cochran's alleged supplement and insulin use reported by?
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. Based on your review of the medical records that you went over in preparing your report, who provided the information that Mr. Cochran was allegedly using supplements or insulin?
There was some reports that he was using enclomiphene, and this is all information I received from the Raleigh District Attorney. And I was not aware of him administering insulin to himself or that that was a possibility.
Okay. Mr. Cochran was reportedly unconscious the afternoon of February 6, 2019. Is that correct?
Yes, that's how it was. That's how the history was reported.
And was it also reported that his wife checked his blood sugar and it was in the 140s at that time?
I've also received that history, yes.
So do you see any way possible that he could have injected himself with insulin?
Objecting to that cause for speculation of this witness. He has no knowledge.
Overruled. You can answer, Doctor.
Could you repeat the question one more time, please?
Sure. Based on those facts, the fact that he was unconscious the entire afternoon and the fact that his blood sugar was reported at 145, do you see any way that he could have injected himself with insulin during that time?
I'm going to object again. It's not time specific. She's not asking any time frame for injection.
Okay, that's fair. Put it in a time frame, please, Ms. Aker.
I'll rephrase, Your Honor. Are you aware of any way that an unconscious person could inject themselves with insulin?
No, and I don't know what the timeline of insulin administration would be, or if it was a single or multiple doses of insulin. I can't exclude that either.
Is there any other information that you believe the jury needs to consider in order to decide this case?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Recross Mr. Selden.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. You were asked by Ms. Aker that you were aware that benzodiazepines showed up in Michael Cochran's urine. Is that correct?
Yes.
But there's no reporting or reason or any accounting of how those benzodiazepines showed up in his urine. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
Now, you mentioned sepsis as a possible cause of hypoglycemia, correct?
Yes.
And sepsis is an infection in the body. Wouldn't that be a fair statement?
Yes.
Now, an infection in the body is usually fought by the body's white blood cells, right? That's essentially what they do. They fight infection or foreign substances in the body.
Yes, the white blood cells are part of the human immune system.
Okay? Are you aware that Michael's white blood cell count was highly elevated when he was admitted to the hospital and in subsequent testing?
Yes.
So, wouldn't that indicate that infection or sepsis in Michael Cochran's body might be another reason for his hypoglycemia?
That is a consideration.
Fair enough. And there were some questions by Ms. Aker, something about how could an unconscious person inject themselves, etc. You don't know the absolute reason for Michael Cochran's collapse and unconsciousness, which was initially reported. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
No further questions.
Anything further, Ms. Aker?
Very little, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Dr. Uribe, are you aware of other causes of elevated white blood cell counts outside of infection or sepsis?
Yes.
Could you just briefly elaborate?
There are lots of causes for elevated white counts. Elevated white counts could be due to a stress reaction. It could be due to sepsis. It could be due to any type of infection. It could be due to any type of inflammation in the body. There is a very, very broad differential diagnosis for an elevated white count.
Okay. And when you reviewed Mr. Cochran's medical records, did you also review his allergies?
Yes.
Did he have an allergy to a benzodiazepine?
It was listed in his medical record.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
Go ahead. All right.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. Give me just a moment.
Very well.
Despite the number of other reasons for sepsis and infection, elevated white blood cell count can be an indication of an infection and possible sepsis. Correct?
Correct.
No further questions.
Anything, Ms. Aker?
No, Your Honor.
May this witness be excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, Doctor. You may be excused.
All right, thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right, let's take our mid-morning break at this time. Members of the jury, please do not discuss the case among yourselves or with anyone else. Please do not view or listen to any reports concerning this case. We'll break for 10 or 15 minutes. You may follow the bailiff to your jury room.
Okay, so while they're on a break, we're going to recap what we just heard from. I guess he was a doctor. He's a forensic pathologist, but he just introduced himself as Paul Shane Uribe. So he's the deputy chief medical examiner, and I was waiting to hear from an actual medical examiner, an ME. The other Dr. Kuvasek was a pathologist. So let's recap. Let's focus on the trial, guys. He reviewed documents from investigators, the officers that were investigating the deletion of Mike. And I'll just say straight up, we're having internet issues again. So if you guys get kicked off, or if I look, if I'm not a straight video, just know. So sorry about that. Just have to deal with it, guys. So hopefully the audio is still okay. All right. So he charted Mike's potassium levels. He found profound. He was asked if it was a significant hypoglycemia, and he said it was profound hypoglycemia. Only a few things can do that. One is insulin administration. He thought that was a red flag. He says the body makes pro-insulin, so half of it is insulin, half of it is C-peptides, so it's a 1-to-1 ratio. When insulin is administered, you have a lot of insulin but no peptides. Then there was an objection. The defense was saying that goes out of his range of expertise. The judge said he's laying the groundwork, so he overruled that. He talks about exogenous administration, which is from an outside source. If your patient is hypoglycemic, you need to draw a test. You need to draw a test then, and not afterwards. He did not see any head trauma, which I thought was interesting because Natalie said at one point Mike fell and hit his head. But then also we heard later that the hospital checked from head to toe and didn't find any evidence that he was fallen and hit his head. Let's see what else. Mike's body was very decomposed. So he performed the autopsy 2 years after Mike had passed away. The other, Dr. Kuvasek, did it 7 months. So he was asked by the Raleigh district attorney. Mike's body was very decomposed. He was told the body was embalmed, but it was not done very well. He said that a couple times. He says the cause of death is a lot of circumstantial evidence that doesn't correlate with medical records. He says that the cause of death is exogenous administration of insulin. Why would a relatively healthy male have such high glucose levels? He ruled the manner of death is homicide because there's no evidence he administered insulin himself. That was objected to, which was overruled. There was no evidence of head trauma. He was the seizures. He was questionable about that. He talks about a pancreatic tumor, which would be very rare. Then Cross came up, and Cross I thought was really interesting. This was a pretty good exchange because Dr. Uribe is very, very knowledgeable and very sure in his ways. So Mr. Sheldon was crossing him, and he was talking about the body decomposition, limits his findings. Did you detect any insulin or C-peptides? He said no. He said, how can you make your conclusion? And he says, well, the clinical correlation from medical records. And then at one point, Dr. Uribe says, I don't use the term absolute. I thought that was pretty good. Clinical observations and any other causative findings, you can make a conclusion. He said there was no testing in the medical records. So that's weird that the doctors didn't run a test for insulin shock or anything like that. I thought that was kind of interesting. There was no test for insulin in Mike's body, correct? I wonder why. Why didn't the doctors test for insulin? He talked about refractory hypoglycemia, and Dr. Uribe says that is not the definition. Refractory hypoglycemia is hypoglycemia that persists despite treatment. So blood sugar levels respond to glucose therapy. He said yes, but then they went down. That is the definition of refractory hypoglycemia. Then they showed the chart for the blood glucose versus LISPO. and there was nothing in the LISPO. I thought that was interesting. He objects to some of the columns, meaning Dr. Uribe. Usually works 4 to 6 hours after injection, but it's also dose dependent, which Dr. Dr. Krieger, I believe, also said. That's also dose dependent. You can give, a half a milliliter versus 10 milliliters. I mean, obviously it's dose dependent. We all know that. That's pretty simple. You take one shot of tequila versus a whole bottle, you're going to feel different effects. You can't inject a healthy human with superhuman levels of insulin. So again, that was the same thing with Dr. Krieger. How can medical science test that on a regular, healthy human? You just can't. It's just nonsensical. So in summary, you can't say humalog insulin was active in Mike's body. He said correct. Is it true the pancreas is one of the first organs to decompose? He said yes. Did you know about Mike's reported use of meds from abroad? You can't exclude those, correct? He said sure. Again, he said I wouldn't use the term absolute. There are no natural conditions that would bring a healthy male's blood sugar levels to that level. So there's no natural conditions that Dr. Uribe could find. Just doesn't happen. If you knew that Mike injected himself several times with insulin, how would you feel about that? He says it's possible, but why would he? Why would they do that? Did you know that he was using it to assist his bodybuilding? He says, to my knowledge, bodybuilders don't use insulin. And the defense was all about this. Did you know that Mr. Olympia died from overdosing of insulin? He said, no. He said, were you, then he got him on this, were you not aware of medical journals about severe hypoglycemia due to insulin use in bodybuilders? He was not aware of that solitary case study. Were you aware of Mike's enlarged heart? He said, okay. Chronic long-term substance abuse can cause enlarged heart. He said, yes. Persons in coma or unconscious for a long period of time, their body is thoroughly examined by the staff. He said, yep, generally yes. Nowhere in hospital records is it cataloged of injection sites. And that is correct. You vote for a bottle of tequila? Seriously? Nowhere in hospital records. Okay, injections. Mike's actions caught up with him versus anything that Natalie did. That's what the defense is saying. Mike wasn't a healthy 38-year-old man. Dr. Uribe says depends on your definition of healthy. Both autopsies found no physical evidence of insulin in Mike's body. I mean, if you're for the defense, that's pretty powerful, right? I would say that's you could hang your hat on that. That's why I have some reasonable doubt right now. I'm still on the fence. You cannot determine cause of death. He said I stated that opinion already based on circumstantial evidence. Humalog insulin effects take effect 15 minutes. He says usually 5 to 15 minutes. And then if Mike was injected, he wouldn't just drop to the ground unconscious. And he said that would not happen immediately. And then they also talked about benzodiazepines showed up in Mike's urine. So yeah, all pretty interesting stuff. Let's see, how do you guys feel? What's the chat up to? Let's see, how do you guys feel? Shirley Roth, he did not have pancreatitis. He did not. Ken Rosenberg says, not legally justice. That's basically an insurmountable obstacle here because a hospital's subsequent negligence is always a risk, sort of like eggshell skull plaintiff. Baca, thank you for keeping track of the objections. You have 3 defense objections, 3 overruled, prosecution objections, 2 overruled, and 1 sustained. I may have missed 1 or 2. I only counted like 3. You got way more than I did. Way more than I did. But that's great. Thank you, Baca, for doing that. Let's see, what else? Mandy, you got some good comments here. Mandy Strong, Natalie delayed getting Michael to the hospital for many hours. Unconscious 38-year-old. Red flag times 10. I agree. Kim Rosenberg, if you put someone in the hospital with life-threatening injuries, the hospital is negligent, and the patient dies, you're very much still on the hook. Mandy Strong says, I've been leaning guilty since learning she took a picture of her 38-year-old husband unconscious and didn't call 911. Yeah, it's very, very suspicious. Absolutely very suspicious. Nan R says, Ola, I haven't watched the whole trial, but I get your question. Right now, it's a maybe for me, which I know isn't helpful. I have doubt right now, but sure seems fishy. All right, what did Ola say? Shirley Roth, I'm more confused now. I know. Ola, what was your question? Let's see. Ola says, do you think that the lack of any other reasonable cause is enough to go to the beyond reasonable doubt? Because that's what I find persuasive. Lack of any reasonable cause is enough to go beyond reasonable doubt. Well, as young black economist said, better to let 10 guilty men go free or people go free than to put one innocent person in jail. So, and young black economist says, ex-pharmacist not even practicing for several years. Just as true, but blood sugar that low should have been an automatic testing regardless of what she told them. I agree. Why did not the hospital ask or just do testing on his for insulin? I don't get that. OnlyFan, can anyone confirm who asked for no autopsy? That I do not know. Maybe doctors are afraid to be sued for running a test? Perhaps. Shirley Roth, all the things she did were suspicious, yep, but is she the type of person to document everything on her phone? It's one thing to document, but it's another thing not to seek help, right? I mean, documentation is one thing. You know, whenever I've been in a situation where somebody needs assistance, I don't sit there and take a photo. You know, I mean, I help. That's just, right? That's what we do. At least I think that's what you should do. Oh, Trial Junkies United. Objection, I've arrived. Usually money. There, Trial Junkies United, you're funny. Brett says the endocrinologist was pretty clear about what testing should have been done, but was not done. Mandy Strong, we are still in the state's case, but the defense has a lot of red flags to overcome. I agree. Ola says, yes, but it's a jigsaw puzzle, right? And at some point we can see the whole picture even without all the pieces. What's up, Fala? Apparently you're not, but others who do the same thing are. And with that, I'm done. Fala, what's going on? Gina Farley says the severe hypoglycemia and the delayed response to get Michael to hospital make me suspicious. Totally agreed. I think that's kind of where we all kind of stand. Right, Mandy, if a 9-year-old passed out unconscious, what would you all do? Call 911 every time. Or if it was your spouse, if it was your significant other, what would you guys do? Shirley Roth, not calling 911 plus having people move him around doesn't look good for her. Agreed. It's all circumstantial, and I think that's what the state came in. They said, all we have is circumstantial evidence. We don't have anything solid. We don't have a smoking gun. And then Dr. Uribe just kind of solidified that. He's like, no, there was no insulin in there in his body, but circumstantially, a 38-year-old healthy male would not have blood sugar to that extent, you know? Mandy Strong says, oh, Gina Farley, great point. They were focused on fixing it rather than what caused it. All right, Gina, what did you say? Oh, Gina Farley, my diabetic sister said instead of testing for insulin, the hospital was in emergency mode. Okay, so yeah. Okay, Fala, I hear you. All right, well, whatever happened, let's try to move on. I'm not quite sure what happened, but We're not picking on anybody, all right? So let's just, nobody pick on anybody. Let's just try to move on and focus on the trial. Shirley Roth says, if it was my kitty, I would be freaking out. I did when my 17-and-a-half-year-old cat couldn't walk. Yep. Yes, Psychosaurus Rex. There is an email address in our description. In every description, there's an email address. Did we not put it in this one? Doggone it. Did not make it into this one. All right, I will fix that. But here you go. Info at trialtvlive.com. I guess it got, let's see, we are social, send us stuff, subscribe. I will fix that. I'll fix that right now. It's always at the bottom. We are social. I am not seeing it. Ways to support our channel. That could be, is it there? Why am I not seeing it? Oh, there it is. Okay, have a question. Okay, thank you, Aaron. Aaron has once again showed me the errors of my ways. Psychosaurus Rex, it's right underneath We Are Social. It says, have a question, want to collaborate, or just general business inquiries, contact us. So this is where it is. Am I able to do that? Nope. So those that are looking for it, it's there in the description. It's in every description. There's a little envelope, and it says have a question. So just go ahead in there. Okay. Let's see. Young black economist says, same with the cops. Some people don't see how anyone wouldn't call cops an emergency. Others don't see how anyone could ever call. I don't think that's evidence of a crime. Yeah, it's weird. I mean, but this is your spouse, right? So we're talking about, so think about it. Okay, it's one thing to see somebody, you're walking down the street and you see somebody get shot or somebody get stabbed or somebody get robbed. Depending on where you are, who you're with, you're going to A, do something or B, not do something. But if you're in your house, comfort of your own home, your spouse, your significant other, you've been with this person for 13, 14, 15 years since high school, they collapse, what would you do? What would you do? And I'm asking everybody, but specifically, I'll say young black economists, what would you do? Would you call for help, or would you let that person who you care about, presumably care about, and just, what would you do? I would like to see what you think. Stacy Farrow says, if they found no insulin, did they rule out other possible drugs? She was a pharmacist with a lot of knowledge. The defense is saying that he used, he got supplements from Mexico. And they did find some other stuff. A couple of benzodiazepines were found in his urine. So there were some other, yeah. So yes. Justice says, did he tell her not to call the ambulance or didn't want to go to the hospital? He apparently had said that he didn't want to go to the hospital, but his best friend Chris said that in November, he had black mold and he said, take me to the hospital. But Natalie, well, we haven't heard direct evidence yet, but through her attorneys who have been testifying on her behalf, basically, that he's saying he didn't like that hospital experience, and he had a DNR. So, who do you believe? Let's see. Trial junkies. Let's see. Brenda Meyer, yes. Dedicated call for help. Shirley Roth, even in the street. I heard a DV thing. Call 911 and gave the address. Gave no name. Absolutely. Mandy Strong, 38 years old, non-responsive. Why wouldn't she call 911? There's no reasonable explanation. I agree with that. Hey, K Swan, good to see you in our chat. I wouldn't call people to come look at my unconscious. I wouldn't call people, to come look at my unconscious husband. It's a little weird, right? Gordon, you have to pay for emergency ambulance in U.S. Yes, you do. Baka of 3 didn't want to go to the local hospital. Yeah. Fala says DNR is for hospital and medical personnel. That is true. Let's see. Seriously, I was in an old folks home for a while and saw people have to go through hoops to get a hospital transport. Heather Marie 123. My brother-in-law pew-pewed himself in the leg, and they wouldn't call ambulance because of the bill. His wife and friend put him in the car and drove. Crazy, yes, but money's an issue. Yeah, they say if you're having a heart attack, if you're having a medical emergency, call an ambulance, because if you take a car, the ER may not, they're not going to accept you as quickly as if you come in an ambulance. Trial Junkies United, we don't know who bought them. She could have and given them to him. That is true. I don't trust someone that is a liar and cheating people she is supposed to be close to. Yep, I don't believe her for anything. Young Black Economist, the next morning, I'm glad he didn't take me. I would have been pissed. So I think it really depends, but still too much doubt to charge with them, in your opinion. Fair enough. I'm glad he didn't take me. I think I missed what you had posted before. I'm asking you if you would do that. If your significant other experienced what Mike experienced, what would you do? Maybe neglect, but not M. So you think they overreached? Possibly. Possibly. Brat says, I wish it had not been written off as natural and they'd done an autopsy before burial. Turns out that in this case, the difference between burial and cremation wouldn't have made much difference. That is true. Yeah, Justice, I hear you on this. I can't wait for the defense because we all have way too many questions. Fala says, every single time I have had to have surgery 4 times in the last 2 years for inner ear. Ooh, that stinks. Sorry. That's the worst. They ask me every single time about DNR and advance directive. Shirley Roth says, it all makes no sense. Too much evidence to show intent. Mandy Strong, there's a lot more red flags than refusing to get him to the hospital. Baca says she was dosing him for some time, in your opinion. Yeah, I agree. There's definitely, there's some evidence that he may have been dosed before. Ken Rosenberg says it's also sometimes cheaper to get a lawyer to fight the ambulance fees than to pay them yourselves. What's more American than that? Oy. Hola, I'm lucky to live in Ireland and in a good area for hospitals. My ambulance service is outstanding. Here in minutes and so nice. You are indeed lucky, because that is not the case elsewhere. Trial Junkies United, she was a well-known person in the town. She could have gotten him there. That one friend told her to tell her husband it was her fault and not the wife's. Oh, you're talking about... Are you talking about this case? Young Black Economist. Yeah, overreach. I might call. It's a hard question to answer because I don't know this victim. No, I'm talking about you. What if you were, put yourself in her shoes, which I do all the time in these trials. Put yourself in the shoes of the defendant. Would you have done the same thing as she did? Yeah, Pammy, that's a good one. Agree, Baca. His comment to his friend about feeling poisoned. That is true. Justice. Best trial chat than anywhere. Thank you. And it's you guys. You guys are what makes this chat what it is. And if we get on each other's nerves because we have different opinions, just take a deep breath. We don't, generally I don't think people mean to be mean to each other. But if somebody's mean to you, then we're not going to stand for that either. K Swan, just asking, was there insurance money involved with this? Not sure, because she was involved with like a $2 million Ponzi scheme and she's in jail for that. So I don't know how much more money she's going to get, but she was already in jail So she's already in jail. I'm sorry, not at the time she wasn't, but she ultimately was. OnlyFan, as always, and this is always perfect, waiting for the defense to show their receipts. It's a very interesting case for sure. On one hand, she scammed the Little League. On the other hand, they have no concrete evidence. You're right, and they admit it. They admit it's all circumstantial. They straight up said it was all circumstantial. Mandy says, was the ER told the spouse left him unconscious for many hours prior to arriving at the hospital? I doubt Natalie told him that. Well, it was Chris that took him. Chris, his best friend Chris, took Mike to the hospital. So we have no idea. I can't wait to hear from the ER doctors, to be quite honest. I think that's going to help shape a lot. What did the ER doctors say? Oh, Follow, you had your appendix out. You're 42, been asked every time since first surgery, appendix when I was 20. Yeah, I had my appendix out a few years ago. I do not go to the hospital. I don't go to doctors. I don't go to the hospital. I know I probably should, but I don't. I was at the hospital when I was in 5th grade for I broke my finger, this finger. It's a good, fun story there. As you can imagine, middle finger, 5th grader. It was all wrapped up, so I went to school like that. But then, no, I had not been to a hospital until like 10 years ago. I had my appendix out when I was 40-something. Young black economist, I might. It's hard to put myself in her shoes because I wouldn't do a lot of what she did. I wouldn't call all those rando friends. I'd probably put him in my own car and go to the emergency care. If that was the first time it ever happened, but it seemed like he had these seizures before, so I don't know. No, appendix, gallbladder, ears. Oh, ears are the worst. Those inner ear, that's the worst. Sometimes I wake up and I'm dizzy because my inner ear. Yeah, OnlyFan, I'm kind of leaning that way too. I think this might be a hung jury. I agree with that. Trial Junkies United. Yes, I was talking about this case. One of the first women that testified and was a friend. Okay, she told Natalie, Nat the Bat, that if she was upset about the hospital, blame it on her, so Nat the Bat didn't get the blame. Oh, so that would have been Jennifer was the first. That was her friend, and she's the one that supplied the insulin because her son has diabetes. So that's, okay. Nat the Bat. You're funny. Oh, Fala, your appendix burst. I literally thought I was dying, so I begged a non-friend to take me to the hospital. That's how people knew I was serious. I wanted to go. Yeah, I was like, they said, it was good that they took it out because they said you were this close to being sepsis. Septic? Sepsis. You know what I'm trying to say. Sepsis. Whatever, however that is said. Mandy Strong, Natalie wanted so many to see Michael in an unconscious state. Make it make sense. It's not reasonable. Natalie wanted so many to see Michael. Yeah, that's true. OnlyFan, even her attorney called her a bad hurl. Yeah, Pammy, I'm sure I had a lot of fun with that. Again, 5th grade, what are you, 10, 11 years old? Basically, my friend had a cement mixer and it had grooves on it, right? And it had this hole, so, it had the drum, so I was pushing it, and my finger went into the hole, and I pulled back, and this finger right here was dripping like that, and my bone was sticking out, and I'm like, and I said, I just got my finger off. My friend's running around. Luckily, his mom was there, so this finger was like flapping like that, so I got it stitched up, and then I went to school. It was all bandaged up. Good times when you're 10 years old. Shirley Roth, when you are really sick, you know it. He may have told her he wasn't feeling good before passing out. Possibly. Fala says, I do know what you are saying. Yeah, appendix is not needed, but very dangerous. Go figure. Yep. You know what, Mandy? I must have been in shock because I didn't feel it all. And it wasn't bleeding. I was expecting blood to be, the bone was sticking out and there was some red, but it didn't bleed. Very strange. Luckily it was a clean break because I could have been stunted. I could have been like, that. Yeah, but I lucked out. Young black economist. Most cases are like guy ends girlfriend with weapons. Guy sits on porch and cries about it until cops come. This is more than 10 minutes. Trial Junkies United. I have been in the hospital a few times. Never have they asked if I had a DNR. Yes, a medical directive, but not specifically a DNR. I would have been upset with someone. Mandy, did your friend's mom leave you like that? No. She called my dad. My dad came over and actually she drove me back to my house, which is across the street, but we grew up in the country. And my dad was pretty funny. He reacted. He was like jumping up and down, and my dad was funny. Let's see. Ken Rosenberg. Ms. Nix's trial was a trial on more fundamental aspects of justice. Punishment, deterrence, what exactly is the best or right outcome? This is a real on evidence, the other side of the coin. Oh, this is a real trial on evidence, the other side of the coin. Well, the state just straight up at the very beginning in their openings, they said this is all circumstantial evidence, and Dr. Uribe said, yeah, it's all circumstantial. We don't have anything. There is no smoking gun. Trial Junkies United. I think she could have give him a dose of something and it happened fast. Good grief, Ola. You had a heart failure on Thursday? And I'm thinking debated calling an ambulance till Sunday night, by which time they said it was a heart attack and rushed me off. LOL, all fine, but I do get the not wanting to go. Holy mackerel. Like this past Thursday? Good Lord. Crystal Limited Edition. You know what's funny? I have had so many surgeries since the accident in 2019, and I have never been asked about a DNR. Interesting. Typos. Ugh, sorry. That's okay. That's part of my job, is to read through them. Young black economist says, DNR even technically legal? I'm not sure. Trial Junkies United. Learn to go to hospital when you need it. People, don't put your loved one through planning a funeral. That is not a good thing. I agree. Fala, y'all are giving me a complex, and why my doctors keep asking me, yeah, what do they know? What do they know? What do they know that you don't? Child Junkies United. Fala, I will go kick them for you. Next time you go, have them call me. Oh, court is back. Seriously? Okay. Whoop, whoop. Let me get back. Yep. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. That's why we love our mods.
In Chief, Ms. Akerd, please call your next witness.
Your Honor, the state calls Timothy Bledo to the stand.
Bring a cup of water with me.
Certainly. If you'll raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
You may have a seat. All right, Ms. Akerd.
Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
It's Timothy Bledsoe, Timothy, Bledsoe, Bledsoe.
And you're retired now, is that correct?
That's correct.
How were you previously employed?
I was employed by the West Virginia State Police as a West Virginia State Trooper from September of 1994 until April of 2022.
And are you still involved with West Virginia State Police at all?
Yes.
How so?
Prior to my retirement, I was asked by the staff at the West Virginia State Police Academy to periodically do a presentation to the training classes that are put on there for cadet training and basic officer training, and I do that from time to time as they schedule that.
During the course of your employment with the West Virginia State Police, did you have occasion to investigate a Natalie Cochran?
Yes, I did.
And is that the same Natalie Cochran that's on trial today?
That's correct. And she's seated here at defense counsel table with her co-counsel, Mr. Victor and Mr. Selden.
Your Honor, could the record please reflect that the witness has identified the defendant?
It shall so reflect.
Thank you. What did you investigate her for?
Initially, the investigation centered around a potential of financial crimes, and then as we continued that investigation, we also investigated the death of Michael Cochran.
Your Honor, I'm retrieving what's been marked as State's Exhibit 1. I would request permission to approach the witness.
Yes, you may do so.
Can I see that for a second? Oh, okay.
Were you present at the time that the events in State's Exhibit 1 occurred?
Yes, I was.
And have you reviewed State's Exhibit 1?
Yes.
Can you identify for us what that is?
Yes, this is the plea agreement signed and carried out in the district court for the Southern District of West Virginia, in which the defendant pled guilty.
I'm going to object this entire line of questioning. We're not retrying here the federal case.
Your Honor, this is simply a line of questioning to introduce the federal document of which the court has taken judicial notice into evidence.
For what relevancy?
It is relevant because it's going to prove that Michael Cochran did not know what was going on in the defendant's Ponzi scheme.
That document has nothing to do with Michael Cochran.
The stipulation of facts that is reflected in that document does not mention Michael Cochran, which goes to show that he did not know what was going on.
I'll overrule the objection. I'll permit it, and I'll preserve your exception, Mr. Victor. Go ahead. You may rephrase or re-ask the question, please, Ms. Akron.
I believe I asked you to identify State's Exhibit 1.
Yes, this is the plea agreement which was signed by the defendant involving the financial crimes in which she was charged in the federal court for the Southern District of West Virginia. She pled guilty.
And does that document accurately reflect the events as you recall them?
Yes, it does.
In that document, is there a stipulation of facts signed by the defendant?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, is Michael Cochran mentioned anywhere in that stipulation of facts?
No, he is not.
Your Honor, at this time I would ask to move State's Exhibit 1 into evidence.
I'm going to object on the same grounds that I objected before, the relevancy.
Have we dealt with State's Exhibit 1 already? It has not been admitted?
No, sir.
Okay. I'm going to admit it over objection. I'll preserve the defense objection and exception to the document.
Thank you, Your Honor. Lieutenant Blitzen, can you please tell us what you know about Michael Cochran?
He was 38 years old at the time of his death. He was married to the defendant. They shared a home here in Raleigh County in the Daniels area. Had 2 children together. I never met Michael Cochran personally, but through investigation and I think.
So I'm going to object based on lack of personal knowledge.
Your Honor, his personal knowledge was gained through his investigation.
Well, which is based probably on hearsay. And again, lack of personal knowledge.
Overruled. You may continue, please.
And through the investigation, we learned that Michael Cochran was someone who was very conscious of his physical fitness. He was into working out, possibly bodybuilding, and also was very conscious of his standing and reputation in the local community.
Was there any point in your investigation, I'll rephrase, did it ever appear to you as though Michael was questioning the legitimacy of Tactical Solutions Group?
That is a leading question. I object to that.
I think I have to sustain that objection.
You obtained a search warrant for the defendant's phone, is that correct?
That's correct.
And in reviewing that telephone, were there any text messages that caught your attention at any point?
Yes, numerous ones, particularly around late September of 2018, the text messages that we were reviewing as part of our investigation at that time.
Your Honor, I'm asking for 3 exhibits to be marked at this time that have been reviewed by the defense.
All right.
I believe these are 22 through 24.
Yes. Number 22 through 24, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Bledo, could you please identify the parties in these text messages on the screen?
The 304-228-1321. That would be.
Your Honor, could he speak into the microphone? I can't really hear him.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem.
The 1-304-228-1321 telephone number is identified as being the cellular phone number for the defendant, and the one titled Uncle Buster, I believe that was the uncle of the defendant, Charles Hawley.
And there were several text messages along these same lines, is that correct?
That's correct.
What about these text messages stands out to you?
The first text message is from the defendant to Uncle Buster. It says, "Good evening. After all your contracts pay out, I won't be able to invest them anymore. I will cut your checks as soon as they come in. I am very sorry I wasn't transparent with Michael on all the contracts we had in the works." That's one of many demonstrations throughout the text message.
I'm going to object.
Sustained. That was unresponsive.
Could I allow?
Yes, you can follow up with a question.
Move to strike, Your Honor, that last answer.
Yes, I'll grant that. Ladies and gentlemen, disregard the last attempt to explain.
Lieutenant Bledo, why does that text message stand out to you?
Because the defendant is obviously communicating that she was not transparent with Michael about aspects of the business.
Now, these text messages are across a couple of pages, but did you identify the parties in these messages as well?
Yes, again, this is a defendant's phone, and it appears to be communications with her sister, Penny Carrico, who I believe has since been married and is now maybe Penny Lowry.
I'm just moving on in the same conversation to the top of the next page. Why does that text message stand out to you?
For the same reasons I stated on the previous. It's a very similar in context and has the same wording that Michael and I should have been. Details with Michael and I should have been completely transparent with him. That's similar to the previous text.
I don't think the jury can read these texts. Can you, members of the jury?
Working on it.
Okay.
Hit the T until you can read.
Maybe you could assist Deputy Fry. We need to focus in.
Yeah, turn that light. Okay.
If I bring down the house lights, does that help at all or make it worse? Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm going to take that one away now. Doing my best to get it all on there. And finally, Lieutenant Bledsoe, could you please identify the parties in these text messages?
Again, yes, that's the defendant's cell phone number, and also identified as the other phone number is identified as Wendy Poteet, which is the sister of the defendant.
What happened in September of 2018?
From our investigation, we learned that, and these texts are an example of how we learned that Michael Cochran discovered that there were aspects of the business, particularly related to the purchase or investment into contracts and the amount of money that investors were investing versus what he believed, what he had been told by the defendant. And more importantly, the promised return was much larger to those individuals than he had previously believed. And he was extremely upset by that.
Excuse me, Your Honor, I've got my exhibits all out of order.
Okay, take your time.
Your Honor, I'm now presenting what I would ask be marked as State's Exhibit 25.
Okay.
And all of these exhibits have been reviewed by the defense.
Can I just see it for
Sure.
for a second? I don't have these numbers memorized.
Right.
This will be State Exhibits number 25.
Thank you.
I'm also going to ask the state's exhibit 26 be marked.
Very well.
Number 26, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Lieutenant Bledsoe, could you please identify the parties in these text messages?
Yes, that's communication by cell phone between the defendant and Michael Cochran.
Can you see this, members of the jury?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
And what to you is the significance of these text messages?
The defendant appears to be relaying to Mr. Cochran.
Well, I'm sorry, Your Honor. If it appears to be, then the witness is speculating.
Sustained. You can rephrase, please, Ms. Aker.
What about these text messages was pertinent to your investigation?
Based on our investigation and reviewing these text messages, they are reflecting amounts, large amounts of money that are being presented to Michael Cochran in the context that they will be being paid to their business as part of their contracts with the federal government.
And are these the same parties as the previous text messages?
Yes.
What about Michael's response was significant to your investigation, if anything?
Yes, based on our investigation and again reviewing these texts, he was, and based on the information that I testified previously about what he had found out, he was trying to find out.
Your Honor, the witness is speculating. The witness is stating something based on hearsay. I object to this.
Well, I think it's based on his investigation, and I think it's proper. I'll allow it. You may continue, sir.
Judge, may we approach on that?
Sure.
Investigation.
It was brought to my attention by Mr. Heinzman.
And what exactly was brought to your attention?
He had received information from one of the troopers at the Beckley Detachment, Sergeant Ellen Marsh, And that information indicated that there was potentially financial crimes or a crime or crimes being committed by the defendant.
And what steps did you undertake to begin your investigation?
A wide array of things, just gaining all the background information that we could. Some of it was, obtained through open source. The business had a website that we were able to look into. But at the same time, doing an investigation of that nature, it's important to, especially if it's something that you believe is still ongoing, you want to make sure that you don't, tip your hand. And so we tried to be as covert as possible in exploring the information into the financial crimes. And we were able to...
Your Honor, I'm going to object. This is non-responsive. It's we. The question was, what did you do? Because I don't want any answers based on hearsay.
Okay. Lieutenant Bledsoe, if you'd confine your answer and testimony to the activities that you engaged in yourself.
Yes, sir.
You can continue if you can phrase it within yourself.
Yes, I participated in the investigation in that. I was a participant in assisting in obtaining grand jury subpoenas to obtain documentation, interviewing witnesses, potential witnesses, and just the collection of any and all known documentation or information that we could possibly find related to the allegation.
And just so we're clear, financial crimes were not the only allegation that you investigated, right?
At the beginning, yes, it was. But as the financial crime investigation continued, then I also was involved in investigating the death of Michael Cochran.
And in investigating the death of Michael Cochran, what steps did you personally undertake?
Very similar to what I stated earlier, and also met with the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner for West Virginia once I learned that Mr. Cochran had not underwent autopsy upon his death.
Did you conduct interviews during your murder investigation?
Yes.
Did you obtain search warrants?
There was a search warrant obtained, but the basis for that affidavit was based on the investigation of the financial crimes.
Were you ever aware of an audit on the Cochrans?
No.
Were you aware of allegations of an audit?
Yes.
And by whom were those allegations made?
The defendant.
Your Honor, I'd ask this be marked as State's Exhibit
Number 27, Your Honor.
Very well.
Now, as far as this is concerned, I only want to focus on this text message. Who is this text message coming from?
The defendant. Excuse me.
So, did you ever uncover any evidence that an audit occurred?
Absolutely not.
What was the audit used as an excuse for?
For the delay in repaying investors or the business.
I'm going to object. We're back to the money laundering trial.
Your Honor, the point of this is to prove that Mr. Cochran...
Wait a minute, you all are talking at the same time.
Yes,
Let me hear from Mr. Victor first. Go ahead.
The answer and the question and the answer suggested the same thing that the court has sustained the objection to already. That is, we're retrying the financial case, and we should and calling for all kinds of speculation. And we don't need to do this. This has nothing to do with murder trial. This is irrelevant.
Now, Ms. Aker.
Your Honor, the purpose of this and the relevance is to prove the state's motive, which is that Michael Cochran did not know that a Ponzi scheme was being run, and that is why we purport that the defendant killed him.
I'll allow it. The objection's overruled. Continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Lieutenant Bledsoe, are you aware of anyone by the name of Betsy Britland?
I'm familiar with that name, yes.
Can you tell us who she is?
No, I cannot.
And why is that?
Because through this investigation, I learned that that person, the way that it was being presented, was not actually a real person or employed in the manner in which it was also being portrayed, or she was also being portrayed to be employed.
Now, was she ever mentioned in the defendant's communications with anyone?
Yes, numerous times.
And who was she purported to be by the defendant?
An employee with the Defense Finance Accounting Services, which was commonly seen throughout documentation reviewed in this investigation as DFAS.
What does DFAS stand for?
Defense Finance Accounting Service, I believe.
What's the significance of the government shutdown that began in December of 2018?
It was a legitimate government shutdown, as most of you may remember, but it also provided that the business of the defendant was not able to provided an excuse as to why the business could not do government contract work or receive payment from the government for contract services.
And do you recall learning of an incident that occurred with Michael at BB&T during that month?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Through the investigation and interview of witnesses, I learned that Michael Cochran had...
Again, it's based on hearsay and some third-party statement, Judge.
No, I don't think so. I'm going to allow it. The objection's overruled. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I learned that the Cochrans were sent a letter by BB&T Bank here in Beckley, and the nature of that correspondence was to inform them that their bank accounts with BB&T were going to be closed. And in response to that, Mr. Cochran went to BB&T Bank personally and was very irate, very upset, to the point that his close friend Chris Davis had to be summoned to the bank to calm him down.
Object to any characterizations of irate, and the witness is speculating at this point. The witness doesn't know.
I'll allow it. Pose another question, please, Ms. Aker.
Yes, Your Honor. Through your investigation, what was your understanding of the status of the Bank of America account as of the morning of February 6th?
that it was zero balance, and that there was no information to suggest that any funding or funds were going to be coming into that account in the future.
And the Cochrans were going to do some work on that account that morning, right?
That is my understanding from this what I learned from this investigation, yes.
We've heard a lot of talk about Michael allegedly using supplements and possibly even steroids. Did you ever locate any evidence to confirm steroid use?
No, it did not.
And we previously introduced a bottle with the FBI labeled enclomiphene citrate. Where did you receive that bottle from?
I recovered that bottle from the residence of Edward and Donna Bolt. Mrs. Bolt is Michael Cochran's mother, and Edward Bolt is his stepfather.
And did the Bolts tell you where they got that bottle from?
Yes, they told me that they were provided that bottle by the defendant after Michael Cochran's death.
Do you have any reason to believe that Michael was suffering from any sort of major medical event leading up to February 6th?
Oh, that calls for medical conclusion. He's not entitled to make that opinion.
Sustained.
I'll withdraw, Your Honor. From your understanding, what was the general health status of Mr. and Mrs. Cochran the morning of February 6th?
Through the investigation, I learned that the defendant was possibly ill that morning and had sought treatment at the Access.
Why don't the court give me a continuing objection to any of this?
I think that would be appropriate. The court will afford the defense a running objection to all of this testimony, but I'll permit it. I'll preserve the defense exceptions in full. You may continue now, Lieutenant, but
could you ask me that question again, please?
Sure. What was your understanding of the general health status of both Mr. and Mrs. Cochran the morning of February 6th?
Again, my understanding of the condition of Michael Cochran and the defendant that morning is based upon what I learned through this investigation, that the defendant was apparently ill that morning and had went to Access Health Clinic to seek medical treatment. And initially that morning, from the information that I reviewed, Michael Cochran appeared to be well, but the information also indicates and supports that over the course of the morning his physical condition deteriorated.
Did the defendant go to the doctor that morning?
Yes.
Are you aware if Michael went to the doctor that day?
No.
Or that morning, I should say.
No.
Through your investigation, especially of the defendant's phone, did you determine if any medications were received that day?
Yes. It indicated that the defendant was given a shot of promethazine, I believe, and possibly promethazine tablets, which was significant when I saw that.
Why was that significant to you?
I'm going to object to that on the other grounds. He's not a medical expert. He cannot testify to it.
Your Honor, there's no indication that he's testifying to medical expertise until we have his answer.
well, we don't know what his answer might be, so I'll allow it, and we'll test the waters.
Why was that significant to you?
It was significant because through this investigation I'd learned that Michael Cochran had was documented to have a severe allergy to promethazine.
What were the Cochrans supposed to do that morning?
It's my understanding through the review of the information in this investigation that the Cochrans had initially scheduled a flight to fly to Virginia, but that flight had been canceled early in the morning on February the 6th.
And why was that flight canceled?
It was my understanding that the flight was canceled due to the defendant's illness.
Were both the defendant and Mr. Cochran home that entire morning?
Not initially, no. They had both been out doing different things at some point that morning.
Where did Michael go?
He had went to Starbucks that morning.
And then he returned home?
Yes, that's my understanding.
What were the Cochrans supposed to do when they took their flight that morning?
As my understanding, they were supposed to meet with Mr. Nexon at the Bank of America.
And we previously heard Jennifer Davis testify that she had insulin sent to the defendant's home. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
Why is that important to you?
Well, it's important for a number of reasons. Throughout the investigation, I had not come across any information that anyone in the Cochran residence was diabetic. Also, in an interview that I had conducted with the defendant, she had informed me that Michael Cochran was allegedly using insulin as part of his bodybuilding regimen. And the fact that she had been to Access Health that very morning, and I'm sure could have requested insulin there.
Judge, please, I'm going to object to all of this speculation and all of this commentary on what my client could have, should have done. Please, would you instruct the jury to disregard this nonsense?
Yes, the jury is instructed to regard the last part of this witness's response, please.
Do you recall why the defendant needed the insulin that morning?
As I recall from the text messages with Jennifer Davis, it was something to do with some type of medical treatment that she was supposed to be undergoing.
What was that medical treatment for?
I believe it was something related to cancer treatment.
And throughout the entire course of your investigation, did you ever uncover any evidence that the defendant had cancer?
No.
What did you determine happened next that morning in the Cochran household?
At some point, Mr. Cochran suffered a sudden illness, and to the point that he had collapsed in the home.
I object to this, Your Honor, to the display of this inflammatory picture. The witness doesn't know anything about the position of the body or the location of the body when this act allegedly happened. I object to it.
I haven't asked him those questions, Your Honor, and I wasn't planning to. I actually would like to know if the witness is familiar with this photograph and who took it.
All right, I'll permit that. Go ahead.
Unfortunately, I am familiar with this photograph, and
I object to the word unfortunately. I'm not trying to be difficult, but I object to any commentary by this officer.
All right, just answer the question, please, Lieutenant Bledsoe.
yes, I'm familiar with that photograph. It was taken by the defendant.
And how do you know it was taken by the defendant?
It was recovered from her cell phone.
Is it your understanding that at that time she was the only other person in the residence besides Michael?
Yes.
spoke with the defendant several times, is that correct?
That's correct.
What did she tell you happened to Michael that day?
She provided contradictory information about what had happened over the course of 3 separate conversations.
May we approach on this?
Sure.
I objected to the word contradictory, and I will ask the court to, or contradictory statements, and I'll ask the court to instruct the jury to disregard that statement.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, please disregard the witness's last statement pertaining to contradictory statements.
You interviewed the defendant on 3 different occasions, is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you have any recollection of the dates of those interviews?
Yes. I believe the first interview took place on or about April the 8th of 2019. The second interview was on or about May 7th of 2019. And the third was on the following day, May the 8th, 2019.
And did anyone accompany the defendant at any of those interviews?
The first interview was actually done in person with the defendant, and yes, her mother was present. The second and third interviews were done by telephone.
During the first interview, did the defendant tell you or give you her recollection of what happened to Michael the morning of February 6th?
Yes.
Could you elaborate?
Yes. She said that, as I stated earlier, they were in the residence together, and that Mr. Cochran had suddenly went into the kitchen, and she had heard a noise in there. I think she said it was a thud. She gave the time reference in that interview of 10 a.m. that morning. She went into the kitchen, and Mr. Cochran was in the floor, and that she had discovered a bottle of enclomiphene citrate on the kitchen counter when she went into the kitchen.
And did she also provide a recollection of events of February 6th during your second interview?
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that for us?
Yes. At that time, she said that the morning of February 6th, that when she and Michael returned home, that they had sat together for approximately an hour, and that Michael Cochran was doing the best that he had ever done in his life, and that not long after that, he had went into the kitchen, threw up in the sink, and fell and hit his head on the granite countertop and ended up in the floor.
And did she tell you where in the house they were prior to Michael getting up and getting sick?
I believe they were she told me they were in the living room area. And also in that interview, I recall that she stated that she had recovered the bottle of enclomiphene citrate hidden in a cabinet instead of sitting on the kitchen counter as she had previously stated.
And lastly, what was her recollection of events of the morning of February 6th during your third interview with Mrs. Cochran?
During that interview, she indicated that, again, they had gone separate ways that morning and had returned home, and that upon returning home, Mr. Cochran had been sleeping on the couch for approximately 45 minutes to an hour, and that when he awoke shortly after that, he went into the kitchen and had collapsed. And also she introduced that in that interview that Michael Cochran was allegedly using insulin as part of a bodybuilding regimen, and that he readily kept insulin and needles in the home for the purpose of using that in his bodybuilding. I asked her if she had ever injected Michael as part of that to assist him. She indicated that she had not, that he injected himself. And I asked her if he had a common injection site that he preferred to use, and she listed or recited different areas on the body, but the one that stood out to me was she said that his back, or in the back, and that just seemed odd to me.
Now, we know that Michael passed away shortly after that. After he passed away, did TSG continue to operate?
Yes.
And how do you know that?
Through investigation and collection of records and interviewing of witnesses, the business continued, and the defendant continued to try to solicit investors to come into the business. I believe additional investor or two did come into the business.
I'm going to object to this line of questioning. This is post-murder, supposedly. That is irrelevant to this trial.
Your Honor, it's relevant because it proves that Mrs. Cochran was the one that was running the business, not Michael.
Objections overruled.
In addition to that, the defendant had also went to several local high schools in Raleigh County because it was nearing graduation season, and that she had attempted to present scholarships to students who were graduating. And
Judge, I'm going to object to it now. Now we're retrying the financial case again.
Your Honor, my answer
This has nothing to do with what may have happened months before, weeks before, or months before.
Did you care to respond, Ms. Akron?
Your Honor, my response would still be that this is simply being offered as proof that Michael Cochran was not the one that was running this business. And that is our motive for the defendant killing him.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, but we have never objected to the fact that my client was part owner of the business. So, and now the alleged victim is dead. So, business is being run by whoever is left in this business. And so I object on the relevancy of all of that information to the trial at hand.
I'll preserve your objection, but for the reasons stated by the state, I'm going to allow it. The objection's overruled.
she had presented those scholarships, which turned out to be worthless. And then in addition to that, she continued to provide the same excuses to investors that...
I'm going to object to this editorializing, the constant editorializing by this witness.
Your Honor, we can move on.
I'll sustain this objection.
There's a federal magistrate that issued a search warrant for the Cochran residence in this case. Is that right?
That's correct.
Were you the affiant on that?
I was.
Did you participate in the search of the defendant's home?
I did.
And after the search occurred, did you review the property receipt for that search with the defendant?
I did.
Are there any corrections that you want to make to that property receipt?
Yes, there was one that I noticed in the days following the search warrant while reviewing the documents and things related to the search. I realized that one item had not been properly documented on the property receipt. It had been properly identified and photographed during the execution of the search warrant and packaged and taken from the scene, but it was not listed by the agent who was completing the inventory at the scene.
What procedure did you follow in reviewing the property receipt with the defendant?
At the conclusion of the search warrant, I asked the defendant to join me in the kitchen area at the table so I could go over the property receipts with her. There were 4 of them, and explain to her what exactly they were and that those were her copies. I believe her mother was present for that as well. And got the document out and for the property receipt for the home that we were in. And when I identified that, the defendant immediately began going through the pages. There's multiple pages to that document. And she stopped and identified an item with her finger and said, this right here, this bottle of insulin, I keep this here at my home for a neighbor's child who's diabetic. And I said, okay, thank you for that information. And we concluded the search warrant and left.
Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness at this time, and I would ask that states 22 through 27 be admitted into evidence.
All right. Are there any defense objections to states exhibits 22 through 27?
No, Your Honor.
States 22 through 27 will all be admitted into evidence. Members of the jury, it's 12 o'clock noon, and that's a perfect time for us to take our break. We will do so, our luncheon recess. Please do not discuss the case among yourselves or with anyone else. Please do not view any portrayals of this case online, on television, or in the newspaper. Please do not listen to anything on the radio. With that constant admonition, just like a parrot, I will release you for your lunch break and be back in your room about 1:15 if you could. We'll start up at 1:15. You may follow the bailiff to your jury room.
Okay, so they're going to break for lunch. And we will too. We're going to set up another stream, but I will recap what we heard so far. So this was Timothy Bledsoe, who is a retired state trooper. And he got out some good stuff. There was lots of objecting that went on. So they're coming back at 1:15 Eastern. So it's 12 noon here. Eastern, so about an hour and 15 minutes. So, Timothy Bledsoe is a retired state trooper. He initially investigated the financial crimes, but then he, because of that, they started to look at the deletion and the deleting of Mike. He tried to get the plea deal. Well, he talked about the plea agreement. That was an objection, and that was overruled. So Natalie, they got in Natalie's plea of guilty of the financial crimes, and in the stipulation of facts that were signed, Mike is not mentioned at all. Trooper Bledsoe never met Mike personally. Objection, personal knowledge, that was overruled. Baca, you're going to have to show how many objections because I missed a few. Mike was someone who was very conscious of his personal appearance in bodybuilding. He also was very conscious of his standing in the community. There was another objection. That one was sustained. Then they talked about cell phone warrant and text messages. And let's see. Oh, that's the glucose levels. Okay, we can talk about that at another time. Then they talked about Natalie and Uncle Buster, and that was sustained. That objection was sustained. Natalie was not transparent with Mike about aspects of the business. Mike discovered aspects of the business and investors' money and promise of return. These were all text messages. He was extremely upset because he didn't know the extent. There was another objection. Lots of objections in this testimony. Text messages of amounts of money being paid to their businesses. Business had a website that they looked at. And there was an objection there. He conducted the deletion investigation and obtained search warrants, but based on the financial crimes. So the financial crimes is what started this. And then it led them to scratch their heads and look at why was Mike, taken out. Heard about, and then this was weird, heard about allegations of audit from Natalie. Never uncovered evidence of an audit. There was an objection there. So why would Natalie talk about allegations of an audit? Not sure about that. He got a vial from Mike's mom, who got it from Natalie. So Natalie gave the vial to Mike's mom after Mike passed away. There's no evidence of steroid use, and I missed that. You guys were talking about no evidence of steroid use. I missed that part. Health status was based on the investigation. Mike was ill and went to a health clinic. Mike appeared to be well at first, but physical condition deteriorated over time. Natalie went to the doctor too. Mike did not. So Natalie went to a doctor. Mike went to a health clinic. Natalie was given promethazine shot and tablets. And then I also missed who's allergic. Who was allergic to promethazine? Was Mike allergic to it, or was she allergic to it? I missed that. Oh, Baca, okay, thank you. So, Baca, defense objections, 16 overruled, 3 sustained, with 3 judge telling the jury to disregard. Yep, 7 sustained. Prosecution objections, 2 overruled, 1 sustained, running count, yeah. Yeah, crazy, right? Okay, so let's get back to, so I missed 2 things. Who was allergic to promethazine? Promethazine or promethazine? Promethazine. Who was allergic to that? That was one question. And then the other question was no evidence of steroid use. So help me out with those 2. I missed those 2. I missed those 2 questions. Okay. Cochran's was supposed to fly to Virginia, but that was canceled on February 6th due to Natalie's illness. We knew about that. Both had been out doing things that morning. Mike went to Starbucks. First time we heard that. They read, then some texts were read. Mike had to take 2 of Natalie's blood pressure. Yeah, Natalie, it was her text messages, and she was concerned that Mike had to take 2 of her blood pressure pills. Mike was already using insulin in his bodybuilding program. Mike suffered a sudden illness and collapsed in the home. So there were 3 interviews, right? The first interview was 3 interviews of Natalie. First one was in person. Interviews 2 and 3 were by phone. So in the first interview, they were in the house together. Interview number 1. Natalie's story was that they were in the house together. Mike went into the kitchen. Natalie heard a thud. This was around 10 a.m. She entered the kitchen. Mike was on the floor. Bottle of clomiphene citrate was on the counter. Okay, that's the first. She hears a thud. He's on the floor. That's first interview, first story. Second interview, Mike was doing the best he had been doing in a long time. He threw up in the sink, hit his head on the counter, and the vial was in the cabinet. Third interview, they had gone their separate ways, returned home. Mike had been sleeping on the couch for several hours. Mike went into the kitchen and collapsed. Mike was using insulin for bodybuilding. That's the first time we heard that. Natalie states Mike injected it in himself. Did Mike have a common injection site? She says his back. And the Bledsoe said that seems odd to me. I guess you got to. How do you do that? And why would you inject it on your back? I guess into your muscles? Why not just inject it into your arm? Very odd. One item not properly documented on property receipt, not listed by agent, taking inventory. Asked Natalie to join him at the table. This is Bledo. Asked Natalie to go over this property receipt. And he showed Natalie the receipt, and she was going through it. And Natalie pointed out one item, and she said, I keep this bottle of insulin for a neighbor's child who is diabetic in my home. All right. Yeah. There is so much going on that she changed her story. Not a lot, but enough, right? Mandy Strong, I didn't hear that Michael saw a doctor that day. He went to this health clinic. She said he went to a health clinic. She went to a doctor. He went to a health clinic. Mike went to a Starbucks. Natalie went to a clinic, got medicine. Michael was severely... Oh, okay, that's what it was. Okay, so Mike was allergic to. Mike was severely... Thank you for that. Severely allergic to it. So she got a shot and tablets. Mike was severely allergic to. That's pretty good. Okay, so Aaron has created a new stream. Thank you, Aaron. So we're going to do what we did yesterday. We're going to end this stream and then start a new one. Yeah. Sorry?
It's ready to go.
Okay, ready to go. Dream of Landry at Trials Junkie United. That's crazy to be able to do that in your own back. That is just insanity. OnlyFans says, damn, she struck the needle on his back at the kitchen. Seriously says, injection sites are supposed to be in the fatty parts of the body, not muscle. I would think muscle. Right? Muscle, too. Mandy Strong, but she borrowed insulin from neighbor for her cancer that she didn't have. Yeah. Thank you, Ken. Shout out to you guys. Dream of Landry, what part did you miss? You missed what part? That he shot the insulin in the back? What part did you miss? Yeah, Mandy, so many bombshells were just dropped. He was a big one. Maybe this is their last... no, we still need... I was going to say maybe this is their last witness, but I still want to hear from the ER doctors. Still would like to hear from the ER doctors. Hey, widespread panic. Okay, I'm still about 45 minutes behind, but this woman is looking so very bad. Yes. Trial Junkies United. Toes and fingers in the ship tray table up. Put your drinks away. Young black economist. LOL. She tells me to stop drinking coffee so late. Let's see. Brett says, I assume because there were indications of injections on his back and she wanted to imply that he did those, not her. So she came up behind him and she got him, you think? Baca. Twister tryouts. Julie says, you take certain meds and would never ever share them. I know. K-Swan, the cross will be frustrating. I am sure. Absolutely. Brett says, I'm wondering if the initial injection had more than insulin since there were some benzos still in his blood at the hospital, mix of insulin and sedatives. Very, very, yep. Mandy, I'm going to listen again to this past witness. That's a good idea. And OnlyFans says, widespread panic, lunch would let you catch up just nice. Yeah, we're going to probably break in another 10 minutes here ourselves. Justice says, did she lie about meds and insulin because she was worried about losing her pharmaceutical license? I think she had already stopped. I don't think she was a practicing pharmacist when they were doing the government contracts. I think she had stopped already. OnlyFan, I doubt the ER doctors will be of any use or introduced because they didn't do squat. Yeah, I still want to hear from him though, right? Don't you want to hear from them? Just to say what his condition was in? That's like the final piece. I hope they have an ER doctor, I hope. That would maybe, you never know. But you're right, they didn't do any kind of testing, but I still would like to hear from them. Oh, trial junkies, you know he let her inject him. So he's like, hey, babe, can you inject me? And she zaps him with some benzos and he falls asleep. Nanar, I'm a retired nurse, but I wouldn't want my license taken away. Yeah, I don't think she was practicing. I don't think so. I think she was full-time on the government contracts, I think. I don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think she was practicing. I think everything I've read said she used to be. She used to be. Trial Junkies United. The ER docs are just trying to save his life, but if they have bad info, they won't know much. Okay. Fair enough. Mandy Strong, I want to hear from ER doctors as to what info they were provided and from who. Yeah, that's true. Did a friend come in and say, I mean, Natalie had to give them some kind of info. I mean, even though his friend brought him in, I'm sure Natalie was there too. She had to give some kind of backstory. Cross is going to be good, Dreamer Landry, on Bledo. Trial Junkies United, does anyone know if the ER doctors would have run any blood tests? I would think so. Isn't that standard? Don't you just like standard run a blood test? Somebody comes in unconscious? I would think that would be standard. I would guess that would be standard because how else are they supposed to treat him? If I had to guess, Trial Junkies United, I would say yes, they would run blood tests. Let's see what other people say. Nanar, some meds go into fatty tissues, others into muscles. Okay. Brat says, when she was sentenced for fraud, the judge called out that she was faking cancer. She used it to explain why she hadn't gotten around to returning funds. Mandy says, Natalie told the detective Michael injected himself. He asked where. Natalie told him his back. She's a liar. Nanar, usually lots of labs are taken in ER. That's what I figured. I think, right, especially if you come in unconscious, you have to, what, where's your white blood cell count? Where's your, I mean, right, it's based, do you have an infection? You know, all kinds of stuff. All right, guys. Anything else? I'm going to go grab some lunch for myself. Trial Junkies United. I think if he had an injection shot on his back, then Nat the back gave them. Right, because how else? I mean, you literally have to. I mean, you gotta like. I mean, how are you supposed to? I guess you could do this. You could do that, right? You could. So you could do that. It's not impossible. You could do it. It's not impossible. You know. Justice said, State's ME testified that the hospital didn't run the proper tests and should have. That is true. Brat says, in your case, they immediately took labs and rushed me for imaging. They have tons of data. All right, Capri Law, I am going to go enjoy lunch. So on that, guys, we will see you. Thank you to Aaron for setting up the stream. We will portal you over. Oh, wait, very possible, but highly unlikely. OnlyFan says, have a good lunch, people, 1:16 a.m., so I'm having candy. And Mandy, you don't think so? You don't think it can, you know, you could do one of these, right? I could inject myself. I mean, it's possible. Yeah, have your shot of insulin, people. All right. Okay, I'm going to go. Aaron set up a portal, so thank you to Aaron. Thank you to our mods. We got OnlyFan, Julie, Therapist You Know. I know you're going through a tough moment right now, but we're with you. Kristen, we're with you. Therapist You Know. Brat, Rachel B., Florida PI Sam, Widespread Panic, Hellcat. Thank you guys for being with us. We'll pick up in an hour. Basically, we'll come back 45 minutes or so, but trial will start in an hour. So we will see you guys. I'm going to end this stream, and we will see you on the other side. Okay, see you in about an hour. Bye.